Peace, family. How are you doing? This is Onitaset Kumat, founder of the African Blood Siblings and the author of the Pro-Black Compendium, as well as the Book of Power. Today, we're going to read something pretty interesting, and that is going to be uh, this book called How Russia Transformed Her Colonial Empires by George Padmore. This was recorded, this was written in maybe the 30s or 40s. We'll see. But before anything starts, I want to give everybody some time to know that the podcast is going to be aired live, and you can freely comment on the Discord. Just click on the link in the description or in the chat, and you'll see everything that I'm talking about. Let me just tell everybody on Discord that we live, and let's move it from there. All right. So this is How Russia Transformed Her Colonial Empire. It's by George Padmore, and I see in collaboration with Dorothy Pizer. I decided to look very quickly into who Dorothy Pizer was, and then you could kind of see why they say that the Pan-Africanists are interracialists. The Pan-Africanists. So Dorothy Pizer, if you look at, I can actually pull up this Wikipedia page for you, and basically she seems kind of like, I want to say she seems like a loser, to be honest, but outside of being a loser, she is also a Euro Jew, you know? So, it's really hard to tell, but, a lot of times when they don't say the race of a person, it's assumed that they're white, as I say, British. So, British working class, you scroll to the bottom, and this is the closest you can see Black British history, but here's right here, British Jews and Jewish anti-racism activists and Jewish socialists. So, she's like a Euro Jew, and it's weird because look at this right here. She's living with this guy, George Padmore, and she treats him as a wife, although they were never married, and he had a former wife, and apparently she was supporting the couple financially. But they say working as a secretary. But that's like what like that's some loser status, to be honest. But we really want to just get into the book. I just want you guys to know, yes, Dorothy Pizer is white, and yes, George Padmore is an interracialist. But that's what comes with Pan-Africanism. For the most part, like a lot of the Pan-Africanists, as you can see, they're going to mention how she wrote C.L. James' book. I don't remember exactly, but you probably see that he has that. But of course, you see W. Du Bois. Although I believe that his wife was more like mixed race than she was white. Just to clarify that. And Nkrumah, of course, his wife was more like, well, she was white, I believe, but it depends on how you look at it. Either way, she was definitely North African, but like a North African in the sense of like almost like you'd want to say an Arab, but or something along those lines, something close to that. But of course, you want to look into that yourself. I'm not really interested. I just know that they don't necessarily have the traditionally, no doubt in your mind, that's an African woman, but it is what it is. So let's go. How Russia Transformed Her Colonial Empires, a Challenge to the Imperialist Powers, by George Pizer in collaboration. So it's London, 1946. And this is, I'm reason why I chose this. I didn't really read it. I didn't even look into it. It might not be too interesting. If it's not too interesting for me, I'm just going to stop reading it, obviously. And then you can just read it because the book is in the description below, right? But otherwise, if it is interesting, hopefully there's something here that we can gather. It's a really short book. You see it says 2 out of 36 pages. So it's a very short book, and that's why I want to look into it. But also, it kind of tells us what Russia did. I'm thinking it's going to tell us what Russia did and what we can do in essence, because what Russia did, what's good for the goose is good for the gander in a sense. Now, I'm looking at this thing, and it looks like there's a lot more pages in this, so maybe this is not the whole book, in which case that would probably explain why it's so short. So let me just see something. So we're just going to skip ahead. We're going to skip to the end and see if it is. No, it looks like it's only part 1. So it's only part 1 of the book. So that's actually a little bit disappointing. But maybe that's going to be enough for us. So this is part 1, the old Russia, the Tsarist, socialism and imperialist divide. Yeah, I'm looking at this. It looks like it's not going to be as much. Let's see. Self-determination and subjection, Malaya. This is the stuff that we're missing. Labor and empire. Okay. The new Russia, USSR. Oh, administrative division. So yeah, actually, honestly, this is where the good of the book would be in the Tsarist colonial empire. This would be in part 2. Maybe I should look really quickly to see if we can find. Well, this is part 1. How Lenin solved the. Yeah, let's just look into it. Let's just look into it because the Lenin and the Bolshevik Revolutionary Vanguard, these things might lead to some sort of interest. So let's just jump into it. Stalin's advice to the Friends of the Soviet People. On the occasion of their visit to the USSR in 1945, Stalin told the British parliamentary delegation that on their return to Britain they should tell the truth about Russia. We have many things that are good and many that are not. Tell the truth about both. We are quite aware that everything is not perfect in the USSR. In the following pages we have tried to carry out Stalin's injunction. Okay, so the preface. While there exists an extensive literature on the Soviet Union, good and bad, friendly and hostile, very little has been written on how the USSR solved the national and colonial problem which is inherited from Tsarist Russia. And let me say, I know nobody's complained that this should be a little bigger, but we're going to make it a little bigger. No one complained because, let me just double check. Yeah, no one complained because no one's watching. No, actually, it looks like 2 people. But, it takes some load for it. It took some time for it to load. But, let's go. Tsarist Russia. The transformation of the vast ramshackle empire into a socialist commonwealth was one of Lenin's greatest achievements. This book is an attempt not only to survey the results of this achievement, but also to interpret the modus operandi adopted by the Bolsheviks in bringing about the transformation. It is not enough to describe and admire the achievements of the Soviet Union. It is equally important to understand how these achievements were made possible. This is the emphasis of the present book. For the solution of the colonial question in Asia, Africa, the Pacific, and the Caribbean is one of the most urgent problems facing the Western powers, Britain, France, Holland, Belgium, America, at the end of this war. We think it fair to say that in spite of many shortcomings inherent in any project of such stupendous proportions, embarked upon without benefit of the political and economic precedent by which it might be guided, the Soviet government has within 25 years achieved more than any other great power has accomplished in centuries. While it has committed grave errors due largely to the empirical methods forced upon it by historical circumstances, the Soviet government has every reason to be proud of the results of its national policy, especially when comparisons are made with the deplorable economic, social, and political conditions existing in the Asiatic colonies at the time of Tsarism's collapse. In passing judgment, we must remember not only the heights to which the Soviet Union has risen, but also the depths from which it emerged. The industrial basis upon which the Bolsheviks founded their economy after the stress of war, revolution, and foreign intervention had fallen far behind that even of 1914. The whole vast territory of the former Russian Empire has been laid waste, and all vestige of industry has almost completely disappeared. However much we may criticize the Soviet Union's sin of commission and omission, its policy towards the former colonial peoples of the far-flung Tsarist Empire indicates conclusively that only under a planned economy based on socialist principles is it possible to abolish root and branch national and racial oppression and exploitation. The Soviet Union is no utopia. It is a new civilization in the making, the establishment of a socialized economy and the abolition of capitalist property relations have created the psychological conditions engendering mutual confidence between different races, colors, and creeds. The October Revolution laid the foundation on which has been built the fraternal collaboration of the world's most heterogeneous population. People who were traditional enemies have during the war been united in defending their common heritage. This was the Soviet Union's secret weapon. The USSR is a political federation of multinational republics in which all peoples, irrespective of their degree of civilization and social development, enjoy equal political, economic, and social status. It is this one country in the world where the color bar, legal or accustomed, is officially prescribed. Constitutionally, it is a criminal offense to insult anyone on account of race or color. Never during the 3 years residence in the Soviet Union did I encounter the slightest manifestation of racial chauvinism or color bar. To colored people, who constitute the overwhelming majority of the inhabitants of the British Empire, this is of tremendous significance. Not only was there an absence of color bar in social and interracial relations, but colored people from foreign countries working in the Soviet Union were encouraged to enter into Soviet public life and take an active part in political affairs. I had the honor of being the first Negro to be elected a deputy to the Moscow Soviet, and during my term of office I had every opportunity of getting practical experience in the working of Soviet municipal administration. Incidentally, in my own country, Trinidad, I would not be eligible for election to the local legislative council, as I do not possess the necessary proper qualifications. This again illustrates the difference in ethnic democracy as it obtains in the USSR and the British Empire. In South Africa, Kenya, and the Rhodesia, the blacks who form the preponderating majority of the population of those countries are completely disenfranchised, while in most other colonies, where the colored peoples are theoretically entitled to vote, they are practically disqualified by the property regulations. So this is actually really interesting. I want to emphasize this, that you know this color bar, this native bar, like even if we go to Africa, like what if I go to Africa, I may still be barred by my my nativity in a sense. You know, like I necessarily might not be able to hold public office in every country in Africa, obviously, but hold on a second, I just heard something. Oh, this guy. Anyway, I may not be able to hold public office in every country in Africa, but and just the same as you might not be able to hold public office in a lot of places in the West, and particularly in 1946, obviously, or 1943. Obviously, that changed, through the civil rights movement and all that. But the reality being that you don't want to that because of this, the Soviet Union. I mean, it's really interesting to see the Soviet Union do this insofar as it was a young nation, and yet it allowed this black man from Trinidad to hold not only a deputy office, but be able to see the inner workings of the administration. And actually, it's interesting because sometimes when we talk about the Democrats and America, apparently there was once this black man who was able to get into the power circle of the Democratic Party, and he ended up dying on an airplane. Like you know what I mean? Anyway, so but I forget his name, but it's pretty interesting that there was like this one black guy who was actually in the inner circle of the nation. All right. The denial of democracy to the colored races of Asia, Africa, and America on ethnic grounds contains the seeds of a potential conflict fraught with extreme danger. Left unsolved, this problem may, after the present war, contribute to the greatest crisis in human relations, world interracial war. This danger cannot be dismissed merely as the hallucination of extreme nationalists. It is sufficiently important to have received the attention of the Netherlands Minister of Colonies, Dr. H.J. van Mook, in a recent address to the Royal African Society. The germs of nationalism and liberty, he observed, have been so firmly planted in the minds of great colonial populations that their growth is inevitable, and the suppression would only lead to the most horrible of wars, a racial world conflict. It is understandable why the colored Asiatic peoples of the Soviet Union, former victims of the most ruthless forms of imperial exploitation and social discrimination, were united behind the Soviet government in the struggle against the Nazi Herren Volk with a fanaticism and self-sacrificing spirit which has aroused the admiration of the whole world. Not only the valor of the Red Army, but the solidarity of the unique multinational state has demonstrated beyond a doubt the loyalty of subject peoples once they have achieved national freedom and entered freely into political unity with the formerly dominant nation. It is the finest testimony to the judgment of the Soviet Union's national policy as laid down by Lenin. As chairman of the Negro Bureau of the Pro-Intern, I had the privilege to lecture on the colonial question as it exists in various parts of the British, French, and other colonial empires to students at KUTVU in Moscow, the university which trains Asiatic students for administrative leadership in their own territories. I had good opportunity to observe the fraternal solidarity existing between the diverse peoples, the Soviet East, many of whom were traditionally enemies under Tsarism. And this is actually pretty interesting too. So I want you guys to get this right here. the KUTVU. So basically, as I keep telling you, I keep emphasizing that, realistically speaking, universities are what our people should be investing in, particularly in the continent. And these universities should be geared toward the administrative leadership in our own territories. So even in the sense that I said, hey, you know what, maybe I can't rule or maybe I can't hold political office in a certain nation, or like let's just name a nation, like Kenya. Like say I can't hold political office in Kenya, right? I'm barred by the Constitution. You can get a Kenyan student, or you get several Kenyan students, put them inside of a university, and then encourage and finance them to administer in Kenya. And then from there, they can, let's say, legislate such things that would allow for public office to be more open, or would allow for good services and good economic thinking in Kenya. So again, there's a way to directly impact the world, or directly have a impact on this world, and there's a way to indirectly have an impact on this world. And that's really what I would encourage for our people. Okay, so Bitter Medicine's here. Good day, lads. Barbosa's here. Charles Brown or something. Charles Brown's probably his person. Let me tell these people hotel. All right, let's go. All right, so let's go back. All right, so many of whom were traditional enemies under Tsarism. KUTVU students represent a cross-section of the Union, comprising more than 100 different races and nationalities. These young men and women, whom many European colonial officials would no doubt describe as backward Asiatic savages, not only devote themselves to the problem of the Soviet Union in relation to the national reconstruction of the former colonial territories of the Tsarist, reconstruction of the former colonial territories of the Tsarist Empire, but take a keen interest in the colonial administrative methods applied by the Western powers in dealing with Africans and other backward races. This kind of comparative education was fostered by the Soviet authorities. For these Asiatic students have had no personal experience of life under Tsarist imperialism and can only really appreciate the achievements of the Soviet government by comparing them with the economic backwardness and the current cultural stagnation of the colonial peoples in Africa, Asia, and elsewhere. In all the Union republics, autonomous republics, and autonomous territories that I visited during my residence in the Soviet Union, I found the natives of those regions taking a leading part in the political administration. Today, through the Asiatic republics of Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan, oh, it's not Kazakhstan, KUTVU graduates are able to found conducting the local Soviet trade unions, cooperatives, cultural institutions, etc. Whatever criticism or charge one might level against Stalin's policy in relation to socialism and the world revolution and his program of socialism in a single country, he has in the main adhered to the fundamental principles laid down by Lenin as far as concerns the right of self-determination for the Soviet national minorities. Acknowledgement is made to Stalin's book Marxism and the National and Colonial Question. This is the most comprehensive Leninist treatise on the subject and indispensable Marxist classic. Other useful books are Prince D.S. Murky's Russia, providing a short cultural history, Fanine Hale's Women in the Soviet East and the Soviet Far East, and Central Asia by William Mandel, issued under the auspices of the Institute of Pacific Relations, Dr. Hans Kahn's Nationalism in the Soviet Union, the best simplified expose of the subject, and Soviet Communism by Sidney and Beatrice Webb. The last name undoubtedly offers the most detailed survey of the Soviet system available in English and contains much valuable information on the concrete application of the national and colonial policy. There's also a Penguin special, Leonard Barnes' comprehensive study of Soviet light of the colonies. This presents in popular form an enlightened and detailed description not only of the achievements of the Soviet Union, but also of the means by which it has solved the colonial and national question. I can highly recommend this as an essential book on this subject. I want to say this. You see how important it is for them to write books, transmit books, share books. The only question, of course, obviously, is that these are all like Wazungu books, and it's on a Wazungu subject. But even if I were to ask you, hey, you know what? I wanted to learn more about Cameroon. I wanted to learn more about, let's say Burkina Faso. I wanted to learn so on and so forth. The question becomes, who are the people that you name? And if we wanted to say, oh, we want to study, let's say, Thomas Sankara, who's really, studying Thomas Sankara's ideology, his treatise, and really highlighting his accomplishments and weighing it in that sense, or even like, let's say, I would say one of the best Africans, let's say the top 3 Africans being Nyerere. How many of us are even studying him? And what is the best study for him? That's the question. But of course, there's no answer for that, right? Due to the limited material available, this book required much teamwork to produce. I therefore wish to express my special thanks to my principal collaborator, Miss Dorothy Preiser, for her valuable cooperation in gathering and sifting historical data, and to our mutual friend T.R. Makanan, PPV De Silva, S. Raja Ratman, and T.B. Subu Singha for their helpful criticism and suggestions. Also, to Dr. C. Betheld Clark, who first suggested the idea of writing the book and whose encouragement throughout his preparation sustained this course. Finally, I'm indebted to Dr. S.D. Cudjoe for reading the proofs and making useful corrections. Whatever merit the book may have is due largely to the unselfish cooperation and helpful criticism of my colonial colleagues with whom I have discussed the manuscript at every stage of the preparation. Any deficiencies in this cooperative effort are entirely mine. George Padmore, London, 1945. So here's the introduction, the historical background of the Russian Revolution. Alright, hold on a second. brief survey, February to October. So the great significance of the October Revolution is that it placed power in the hands of the common people for the first time in history. That is to say, the proletariat replaced the bourgeoisie as the dictators of power. This in turn opened up the way for the transformation of society from capitalism to socialism. Never since the glorious French Revolution, which replaced the power of the bankrupt feudal regime by that of the middle class, had history seen such a social upheaval. It was the first successful socialist revolution of all time. Unlike the so-called fascist and Nazi revolutions, in reality, counter-revolutions, the October Revolution encompassed a fundamental change in the political, economic, and social life of the Russian peoples. This complete transference of power from the capitalist to the working class was the essential prerequisite for the solution of the national and colonial question. Only the proletariat can cut the Gordian knot which binds the subject people to the yoke of imperialism. The following brief survey of the main events which occurred in Russia between the fall of the Tsarist autocracy and the rise of the Soviet power will illustrate the incapacity of the provisional and Kerensky governments to find a solution to the problem. What do I want to say about this? Let's say this, the socialist revolution. So the idea is that the capitalists, you want to get rid of the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, and replace them with the proletariat. Now, obviously, the proletariat are not really the best people to hold power. That's just common sense. But the bourgeoisie are also not. Let's just say that maybe possibly they're better than the bourgeoisie. I mean, maybe not. I don't know. But the main thing you want to take away from this is this idea that, you know, who the bourgeoisie would be and where. You know, so the bourgeoisie would be those who own the means of production and can pretty much control everything in a community because of how much wealth they have and how important wealth is in a community. So as it's known, I can't remember if it was the top 100 or the top 1,000. Doesn't really matter. But let's say the top 100 wealthiest people in America have more wealth than 100% of black people, something like that, right? That said, you know, to have that kind of wealth concentration in the hands of one people, it lets you know, how powerless the other people would be. And so the idea the idea of getting rid of this bourgeoisie, this element of, you know, concentrated wealth, and how much that concentrated wealth impacts everything in the sense of, you know, what media is produced, what appears on the television, what appears on so on and so forth. You know, just 100 people with enough wealth to to say pull the strings on everything is highly, you know, susceptible. Now, of course, if you wanted 40 million or 200 million or 300 million people deciding everything, it might not necessarily be better than the 100 people, but I mean, like, it depends on who the 100 people are. So really, you know, the object would not be to open up the floor to everybody, obviously, but the object would be to get it out of the hands of people who are exploiting and destroying the environment. You know, so like in certain, like particularly in this year, and of course, you know what we know, you know, there are wealthy white people who will destroy the planet. You know, like there's fracking, there's polluting waters, there's draining rivers, there's cutting down forests. You know, they have, like, no one stops them. You know, so the object would be to stop them. Now, that's not to say that the proletariat would not do all those same things, would not pollute the water, would not do so on and so forth. So in a sense, you know, you do want an education, you do want an educational component, you do want some enlightenment in a sense before you want the people who hold power to have some sort of some principles, and those principles, of course, being the preservation of Earth and nature and humankind, at least for us, particularly, you know, Africans. So you might not necessarily see that. Now, of course, you know, the proletariat. Now, of course, when I say humankind, I say particularly Africans. You might find that Wazungu is more about preserving Europeans, whether they're bourgeoisie or proletariat, and that's another thing to keep in mind. Particularly, so it's like you don't want to get caught up in this rhetoric, even though it does sound nice on paper. It is still, you know, rhetoric, you know, written by Pan-Africanists who were notoriously, misogynist, right? Okay. So political, economic, fundamental change in political, economic, and social life of Russian people. All right. Let's keep going. This complete transference of power from the capitalist to the working class was the essential prerequisite for the solution of the national and colonial question. Only the proletariat can cut down the Gordian knot which binds the subject peoples to the yoke of imperialism. The following brief survey of the main events which occurred in Russia between the fall of the Tsarist autocracy and the rise of the Soviet power will illustrate the incapacity of the provisional and Kerensky governments to find a solution to the problem. What makes a revolutionary situation? There is no specific formula which will reply to this question. An incident is a factory, a strike for economic demands, etc., may provided the objective conditions are there and a disciplined party exists to take advantage of the situation, lead to a revolution which can change the whole social structure. So look at this. What makes a revolutionary situation? He says, look, a strike, right? A strike for economic demand needs a disciplined party to take advantage of the situation. If you're not organized, you cannot take advantage of situations. So like NFACT mobilized and whatever, they could take advantage of a riot or looting or whatever. You can't. So while you might be like, hey, I like rioting and looting, you if you're not organized, you can't take advantage of it. And the thing is this, that Wazungu is organized, so Wazungu takes advantage of these. Just the other day there's a video of this sister who has her store in Philadelphia, and mobs of black people just run in and just grab everything, just rip everything off the wall, okay, right? So white people know how to take it. Like of course you might be like, look, this got nothing to do with white people, and it probably doesn't, realistically speaking. But the reality being that if you don't have that revolutionary cadre, that disciplined organization that could steer the masses and the energy into something productive, then nothing productive will come of it. You will have just destroyed yourselves. You will just be made to destroy yourself. You understand? All of the gangs in America had a noble background, or most of the gangs had a noble background. Like protect the community. And now, to this day, they're killing each other. You understand? Now, to this day, they're taking out the lives of black people. Come on. Whole social structure. All right. Thus, it was on February 23rd, 1917, that 130,000 men workers in Petrograd went on strike. A considerable number of women workers were demonstrating also. Strike had been sporadic for some time, but the resentment among the workers seemed to have reached its height on that day and continued until February 25th, when the Tsar ordered regiments of guards out against them. Some men were shot down, but instead of crushing the workers, the show of authority heightened the revolutionary mood. Next day, other regiments of the Petrograd garrison sent against the workers were won over by them. The soldiers joined the workers and began to arrest Tsarist officials and generals and the free political prisoners from the fortress of Fort St. Peter and St. Paul. On February 27, the Tsar ceased to control forever the destinies of the peoples of the Russian Empire. You see what I'm saying? Very simple, The 130,000, that's a lot of people. 130,000. How many people do you organize? How many people are in your organization? You understand? And you see, the reason why the socialists like these factories is because these factories have so many workers. You understand? Because the bourgeoisie have so many workers. That means that this particular factory owner, if you will, has 130,000 people in his organization, his or her organization, right? 130,000 people in their organization doing whatever the person wants them to, and of course the capitalist is underpaying them and maybe overworking them and blah blah blah. So they go on a strike, and of course they might be striking for something a little better, like just pay us a little more, pay us a little more. But you have this revolutionary cadre saying, no, you know what, the system is corrupt, the system is blah blah blah, and they convince enough people, and they're present at the moment trying to convince even the guards to turn against those people. And you see this sometimes. You see this at the protest today. Where white people are, not just white people, but like where the radicals, if you will, are trying to convince the overseers, hey, you know what? Come join our side. Join our side. Show us solidarity. Show us our solidarity. And the idea being that if the soldiers and the policemen are to turn against, the powers that be, then the powers that be lose their power. You understand? Or they then have a war on their hands. You understand? A war that can go either way. So this is really the method behind it. But again, it goes back to, how many people do you organize? So a lot of what the socialists argue for is from the paradigm that realistically speaking, the people with the most workers, right? The people with the most workers, like the people that essentially the white folk, the capitalists already have the masses that you want to organize. Or the masses already have a shared mood of that can just be heightened into a revolutionary mood. You understand? Heightened into a revolutionary mood, and that heightened revolutionary mood can take over a nation. Now, of course, again, it's not too unrealistic. It's not too realistic. It's not too realistic. It's not too realistic. It's neither. But it just happened. It happened in Russia. It didn't happen elsewhere, pretty much. But that's just what life is. The revolution was made by the workers and peasant soldiers, but the power of the state passed into the hands of the capitalists and landlords, who set up a provisional government under the monarchist Prince Lvov. I said that wrong. Lvov. I don't know. The provisional government included Milyukov, the head of the Constitutional Democrats, Gukov, the head of the Octobrists, and other prominent representatives of the capitalist class, and as the representative of democracy, the socialist revolutionary Kerensky. Side by side with the provisional government, the workers, peasants, and soldiers set up their Soviet or councils. These Soviets first appeared on the Russia political scene during the abortive 1905 revolution, which came about as a result of the Russian defeat in the war with Japan. The abortive revolution was described by Lenin as a dress rehearsal for 1917. Thus, from the very beginning of the 1917 revolution, there existed a dual power, the official government composed of the capitalists and landlords, and the powers of the common people expressed through the Soviet of workers and soldiers' deputies. The first stage of the Soviet revolution, the overthrow of the Tsarist autocracy and the establishment of a republican regime, constituted what is known as the bourgeois democratic revolution, that is to say, the revolution made by the workers, but control of which fell into the hands of representatives of the bourgeoisie. Now, I think it's really important for us to understand that, even though this 1917 revolution happens in the 1917, there was, before that, an attempt in 1905. You understand? That essentially, 12 years passed, but what they're doing between these years, they're organizing and getting together and trying to, come up with their own way for self-administration. The reality being that a lot of us as African people do not have the self-administration on point, and we're not really serious about it. You understand? We're kind of floating in this Western world without any real or true plans towards nationalization or towards independent nationhood. You understand? If tomorrow everything collapsed, who will be your president? Who will be, or even if you have a president, but who will be your king? Who will be your leader? Who will be your monarch? Where will you set up? How will you set it up? Who is the secretary? How do you collect taxes? Blah blah. What currency will you use? None of these questions are developed by our people. And if they are developed by our people, I don't know about them. So they're not really the main currency and language that we have to engage in. But this is to compare again. You have to compare against real revolutions in a sense. And I want to call these people revolutionary. I don't really want to say they're real revolutionary versus whatever, but I just want to emphasize that there's, it's this idea of those who fail to plan to fail. And we see people who do plan. You understand? And then we see people who don't plan. Whose highest thing is to complain about everything the white man does. And never mention what exactly they have done for the black man themselves. So the provisional government, however, was fundamentally unable to satisfy the aspirations of the common people, who, and by the way, I can't really read this obviously, so I might mess up with the words a lot more because they didn't press down the book. Which revolutionary mood in consequence failed to abate. From the end of February, events moved quickly. About the beginning of May, the provisional government gave way to a coalition government composed of 10 capitalists, 5 Menshevists, moderate socialists, and Alexander Kerensky, a socialist revolutionary representing the right wing of his party, Peasants' Party. Kerensky, a middle-class radical lawyer, became Minister of War in the new government. You see what I'm saying? He becomes Minister of War. He gets a position. He gets a title. The coalition lasted only 2 months, inasmuch as it was incapable of solving the question of peace, bread, and freedom, which were becoming more insistent or of coping with the growing unrest which was spreading all over the Russian Empire, including the colonial border territories where local national governments have been set up. So again, they want bread, they want peace, bread, and freedom. Here's the thing. I want to tell you. You want to engage, like when you engage more and more people, you see that at the suggestion of, hey, go to Africa or something, they say, I don't know if I will still maintain the same quality of living if I went to Africa. You know, and of course all the stories of, oh, you need backup generators for your power, or oh, your light goes out, blah blah blah. Those are all scary stories to those who in the West are used to having their bread, peace, and freedom next door to them, and not temporarily disabled every once in a while. People are fighting for their bellies. People are fighting for their bellies, and if you cannot answer the question of a person's belly, then no, they're not going to join a fight with you. Let's see. Growing all over the rock, including the colonial borders territories where local nationalism set up. At the end of June, the coalition cabinet was reshuffled, and Kerensky added the premiership to his Ministry of War portfolio. You see what I'm saying? Like, titles. Before anything happened. Now again, they don't actually rule until October, but they still have titles. They're still preparing for a future. So Kerensky, who entered imperialist ambitions, wanted to continue the war against Germany, and his government accordingly had the full backing of Britain and France. The Russian workers, peasants, and soldiers, however, were more than weary of the war, and the offensive which Kerensky started on June 18 did not encourage their support. During all the while, the Bolshevik Party, the revolutionary section of the Russian socialists, has been gathering its forces. Its leader, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, better known as Lenin, who had been in exile at the time of the overthrow of the Tsarist government, returned to Petrograd on April 3rd. He was given a tremendous welcome by the workers and soldiers of the capital. His first task was to draw together his party, which, without his lead, had been unable to grasp the historic perspective which the situation was opening up, and to mobilize it for action. For this purpose, and look at this, right here, this is all important. See, Lenin, he doesn't remain wherever he was in exile. He doesn't remain there. Okay? In order for Lenin to change the history of Russia, he goes to Russia. Okay? He is in exile, he could write comfortably in London, and he has his light and electricity, he has his whatever, on whatever, and he's, a respected, thinker and what have you. He goes home to be a revolutionary. Okay? He goes home to be a revolutionary. He could have sat back, wrote his books, and, Russia could have remained, a bourgeois, whatever, and he could have just said, what Russia needs to do is blah, blah, blah. No, he goes home and he meets with his people, and they give him that welcome, and of course, so on and so forth. But so you have to be organizing with the people. You have to be involved with the people. All we need is that old goon juice, right? Black socialists and communists don't really exist anymore in America. Yeah. Peace, family. Yes. Alright, let me just say peace. Alright, so let's go back to it. So this is actually pretty interesting so far. His first task, blah, blah, blah. For this purpose, he drew up a document which had come to be known as the April Thesis, in which he outlined his plans of campaign. Look at that. He outlines the plan. He pointed out that Russia needed a second revolution that would wrest power from the coalition of Kerensky, who had not broken with the imperialists, and pass it over to the Soviets. See that? Kerensky's not even one of the final people. Alright, interesting. Organs of the workers, peasants, and soldiers. In other words, Lenin sketched the transition from the bourgeois democratic revolution to the socialist revolution, the passage from the first stage of the revolution to its second stage. The success of the transition, which decided for the people the end of the imperialist war, on the one hand, and usher in the new social order for the Russian and colonial peoples on the other. Even before his return to Petrograd, Lenin had advised the Russian workers to prepare themselves for the task of carrying through the revolution from its first to its second stage. He was convinced that they would be cheated out their rights by the bourgeoisie. In his letter to his party comrades dispatched from exile in Switzerland, as soon as news reached him of the Tsar's abdication, Lenin wrote, "Workers, you have displayed marvels of proletarian heroism, the heroism of the people in the civil war against Tsardom. You must now display marvels of organization of the proletariat and of the whole people, in order to prepare the way for your victory in the second stage of the revolution." You see what I'm saying? Now he's in Switzerland. He's like, hey, look, you got to organize. And like to this day, I told you I used to be in a socialist organization, and they were trying to organize us. They had young black people, you know, in Brooklyn, you know, young black, and I guess you could say brown if you want, but Latino people as well, obviously, and white people too, Asian people, all that. They had like a multinational people who they were trying to train and push this literature on of organize. And to this day, you know, there's a sister that was, you know, there with me when I went there. You know, there's a sister there. You know, she kind of, you know, part of the reason why I stayed in the organization so long. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, she's to this day, you know, every protest, you know, she's on the news, she's, you know, all that, but she's always organizing on behalf of these people, and she's still involved in that same organization, you know. So it's this is how they do it. They purposely train people to be these radicals, to be these revolutionaries, to be these organizers, and it's like, you know, whatever, it goes back to what Martin Delaney said, whatever it costs whites to have liberty, you know, blacks have to be willing to pay the same price. The question is, do you meet up with, because they had weekly meetings. Do you hold weekly meetings where you are working on the development of your people to be organizers and revolutionaries? That's the question. After the collapse of Kerensky's June offensive, the soldiers, in Lenin's phrase, began to sign the peace with their feet. Wholesale desertion from the front took place. The peasants, forming the bulk of the army, started for their homes in hordes. The situation provided the opportunity for which Lenin had long been preparing, for the workers were beginning to realize that his warnings of Kerensky's treachery was correct. Furthermore, he and his party were alone in favoring a program of peace, bread, and freedom, and thus the deputies of the Workers' and Peasants' Soviets, which until then had been largely under the influence of the Mensheviks and socialist revolutionaries, turned to the Bolsheviks, to whom they gave their support in increasing numbers. Assured of the mass backing of the workers and soldiers, Lenin called upon the Petrograd Soviets to get rid of Kerensky and his capitalist colleagues and give all power to the Soviets. So again, you know, the Bolsheviks, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, are the Leninists in a sense. So again, you want to already be organized to take advantage of situations. If you're not already organized to take advantage of situations, the reality is that situations will take advantage of you. Hold on a second. To carry out this task, he set up a military revolutionary committee under the chairmanship of Lev Davidovich. Bronstein, better known as the world as Trotsky. So Trotsky is a pretty interesting person. I want you guys to understand that Trotsky and Stalin are fighting, if you will. And to this day, like, Trotskyists are kind of like internet talkers. As far as I can tell. You know, as far as I can tell, they're like the internet. They're like, you know, free love, you know, make love to each other kind of garbage, you know. Like the people who are in the movement only to get laid. But of course, that's just me, you know, being biased to the Stalinists, I suppose. But that's what the Stalinists say about the Trotskyists, right? All right. Better known to the world as Trotsky. Other members were Sverdlov, Dzerzhinsky, Bufnov, Uritsky, and Stalin. All right. Commenting on the role played by Trotsky in the capture of power, Stalin paid tribute to him in the following passage. The inspired of the revolution from the beginning to the end was the Central Committee of the party headed by Comrade Lenin. Vladimir Ilyich was then living in Petrograd in a conspirative apartment in the Vyborg district. On the evening of October 24th, he was summoned to Smolny for the general leadership of the movement. All the work of practical organization of the insurrection was conducted under the immediate leadership of the president of the Petrograd Soviet, Comrade Trotsky. It is possible to declare with certainty that the swift passing of the garrison to the side of the Soviet and the skillful direction of the work of the Military Revolutionary Committee, the party owes principally and first of all to Comrade Trotsky. Comrades Altanov and Podovsky was Comrade Trotsky's chief assistants. So of course, you know, if you don't know, Stalin kills Trotsky, you know? He's a cupcake. Alright, this brother, man. Alright. Yo, alright. So, Stalin kills Trotsky. Okay? So, even though he might give him some props, he still got that man like a fish. Alright. Within 10 days of Lenin's call for action, the Kerensky government was overthrown, and on October 25th, Lenin was able to announce the victory of the Soviet Revolution. the transfer of power from the capitalists and landlords to the workers and peasants. The dictatorship of the proletariat was established in alliance with the peasantry. The first Soviet government consisted not only of Bolsheviks, but also of left social revolutionaries and others. The Bolshevik revolution, astounding as it may seem, was achieved practically without bloodshed. All the important buildings, such as the telegraph, telephone, and other government offices, were taken over without a shot. In fact, it was only in the taking of the Winter Palace and the offices of the General Staff that there was any fighting. The number of dead was certainly less than the number of pedestrians killed on British roads in a month. The transfer of power from the bourgeoisie to the workers was accomplished almost bloodlessly. The actual mass killing only occurred during the Civil War which followed, when the capitalists and the landlords, with the assistance of foreign armies, attempted to recover their lost power. The responsibility for the killing, therefore, rests with the former ruling class. The same thing occurred in Spain when the capitalists and the landlords, led by Franco, were responsible for the Civil War. This only confirmed that the ruling class will never voluntarily surrender power. So this is obviously should be common sense. The ruling class will not voluntarily surrender power. And even if you can take over the buildings, they have certain measures, they have certain mobilization, and of course the foreign powers will want to do something about it. So let's say, if in some event we say, what, this is African country, we all want to be there, we get together, we mobilize the people, and the people say, look, enough is enough, we're walking away from this, we're taking it over, blah, 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 blah. We take over this country. Now what? You think, oh yeah, we won. Don't think you won yet, because the West is coming for you. Okay? And so you have to beat the West as well. And so this is what they do. The foreign powers being the British, being the Americans, being the whomever, the French, the foreign powers that want to negotiate with the Russian revolutionaries, or the Russian, want to negotiate with the Russian capitalists, right? They want to keep the trade, or they keep the exploitation that they have going. This is geopolitics. And because of this, they come to the aid of those who would be exiled or who would be killed. They come to their aid with their soldiers, and then you have to then fight and struggle. There's nothing that's going to be easy in this world. All right. So Lenin's supreme role in directing the second stage of the revolution cannot be gainsaid. He was the greatest revolutionary of all time. Oh, jeez, my gosh, that's a stretch. But anyway, now, this black man. I think that. So I told you guys already that some Russian girl was helping George Padmore write this book. You see in the title George Padmore and Dorothy Pizer. So this Jewish girl, this white Jew. So the white Jews, if you don't know, a lot of the Jews, the Euro Jews, they were about the socialism, and so that's partly why socialism is so popular today. But partly why the Nazis were going after them, or at least that's what the Nazis say. Anyhow, but. Yeah, so obviously this writing on Lenin is probably her, make sure you tell everybody he's the greatest revolutionary of all time, like there was no time before Russia. Anyway, not only a unique and profound thinker, he was an organizer, an inspirer, tactician, and strategist of incomparable stature. Here was a man who, against tremendous odds, created his own party, which at the time of the October Revolution numbered no more than 250,000. Look at this, 250,000. You have to ask yourself, how many people are you organizing if this is considered a small organization? 250,000. Trained it in the teeth of innumerable difficulties, and when the moment arose for which he had given a lifetime preparation, confidently placed himself at the head of the masses and led them to victory, to the first successful socialist revolution in history. Lenin's part in the revolution is the outstanding example of the role of the individual in history. For if Lenin had not broken with the Mensheviks in 1903, look at that, from 1903 to 1917, it's 14 years of organizing, and organized his own Bolshevik party, when the political crisis arose, the opportunity would have passed, and instead of a Soviet Union ensuing, Russia would still have continued to be another imperialist state, possibly in the form of a democratic capitalist republic. It is quite certain that it would have continued to be a financial colony of Western European capitalism. No Lenin, no Bolshevik party, no socialist revolution. No less remarkable than his role in the socialist revolution were Lenin's contributions to the... And this is really important because I think Sami Sankara, Sankara, who said, or it might have been Cabral, I don't know. It's so hard to remember all these people. But they say that their favorite revolutionaries were, I think, Lenin, Jesus, and Muhammad. But you see, it's partly because if you look into this George Padmore character, he's meeting with these diverse speakers, right? He's meeting with these diverse leaders and letting them know, oh yeah, Lenin is really great, and he lets their little wife come around and they talk how much socialism, blah 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 blah. But that's what it is. You have to have your own. This is why I write my own books. This is why I write my own books, and this is why I want you to read my books, because I want you to see in your own people what other people see in theirs. Okay? I want you to see in your own people what other people see in theirs, because otherwise you're going to look like idiots. You're going to look like idiots, like this George Padmore character talking about this guy Lenin is the best revolution around all time. Like it's just remarkable. All right. No less remarkable is his role in the social revolution, where Lenin's contributions to the international labor and socialist movement. But Lenin was not concerned only with the emancipation of the Russian workers, but with the social freedom of all the toilers and oppressed peoples throughout the world, irrespective of race, color, creed, or nationality. He took as great an interest in the problems of the black. And this is one important. Like, why are you caring about workers? Like nobody should care about the workers of another land. If white people do not care about the black workers of the world, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. You understand? And if it doesn't make sense to you, it's because you're being confused. All right? Let's go. For Lenin was not concerned only with... Oh, Lenin. This is Lenin. For Lenin was not concerned only with the emancipation of Russian workers, but with the social freedom of all the toilers and oppressed peoples throughout the world, irrespective of race, color, creed, or nationality. He took as great an interest in the problems of the black workers in the mines of Johannesburg, of the coolies and dock workers of Shanghai and Bombay, as in those of the British proletariat. He was a true disciple of Marx, who... Trotsky himself gave the figure on the eve of the revolution. Blah, 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 blah. All right. Who taught that labor in the white skin cannot free itself while labor in the black is branded. Lenin never tired of emphasizing to the workers of the civilized countries of Europe and America that their freedom is inextricably bound up with the freedoms of the colonial masses of China, India, Africa, and elsewhere, to whom they must render every support in their fight to liberate themselves from the yoke of imperialism. He insisted that only this unity between the working class of the economically advanced countries with the toiling masses of the colonies and semi-colonial lands can guarantee the final and irrevocable victory over the common enemy, capitalism, imperialism, democratic, or fascist, the victory of all of the oppressed and exploited over the oppressors and exploiters of all races and colors and creeds. So one thing you have to know about America, or even just the world in general, is that that a lot of times you'll find that many of the socialists are in fact black people, and are in fact black women. Like they're overrepresented by their population a lot of times because of these white ideologues. They kind of give you this counter-racist narrative, or this kind of black sympathy narrative. But of course, I want to emphasize again that it's a confusing narrative. When the white man does not like the black man, he's actually being logical and rational. He's looking out for his interests. And just the same, you don't want to go into a situation where you're no longer looking after your interests and you're no longer looking after your land. Because you will essentially lose everything to these white people. This rhetoric, while it looks good superficially, but substantially it doesn't make much sense. And of course, I have a podcast on why socialism is ridiculous, or why black socialism is ridiculous. But you kind of see, the way how I would say is this, that you want to be able to discriminate control administration over your land. You understand? You want to be able to discriminate administration over your land and country. And the reality is that that's what Europe and America do. Now, what they also do is that they discriminate administration of the resources of the world, so the resources of the world go towards them, which is something that they're supposed to do, because if they don't do that, then the resources of the world will be locked away from them. They're supposed to do that if that's as who they are. You understand? Now, on the other hand, you're supposed to do the same, in the sense that you're supposed to want the resources of the world for yourself. And the idea of sharing the resources of the world with your historic enemy, based off with your inextricable differences, right, is foolish. You'd have to deny the history of a people and the means and mores of a people in order to really embrace this sort of economic philosophy. Essentially, you cannot ignore culture. And this is what socialism does. It ignores culture to the point where it kind of says the colonial masses, the Chinese, Indians, and Africans are all just under imperialism, which is kind of the same as, under white supremacy, blah, blah, blah. Whereas, realistically speaking, you want to acknowledge that, the Africans need to practice their own Africanisms. And the Eurasians have to practice their own Eurasianisms. And those two cannot mix. And that's what's really important that a lot of us would otherwise overlook. So, blah, 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 blah. He insisted that only the unity between the working class of the economically advanced countries with the toiling masses of the colonies and semi-colonial lands can guarantee the final and irrevocable victory over the common enemy, capitalist imperialism, democratic or fascist. The victory of all of the oppressed and exploited over the oppressors and exploiters of all races and colors and creeds. In Russia, Lenin denounced anti-Semitism and racial chauvinism wherever it expressed itself among the Russian workers, peasants, and intellectuals. He uncompromisingly proclaimed the right of self-determination for all the backward races of the Asiatic Russia and the oppressed nationalities under Tsarist imperialism. This is the aspect of Lenin's teaching and their application of the Russian Revolution which we are chiefly concerned. Hence, in the following pages, we shall examine Lenin's method of solving the national and colonial question, which today, like yesterday, remains one of the most important issues in world politics. This question is of a particular concern of the British people at this moment. In order to give value to our examination of the Leninist solution of the colonial question, we shall first give a brief account of the rise of the Tsarist Empire and the conditions which obtained among the subject peoples, particularly among those of Central Asia, before the Russian Revolution. This will enable the readers to appreciate all the more the achievements of the Soviet government in applying Lenin's principles in practice. So let's go. The Old Russia, the Tsarist Empire, chapter 1. So that's actually confusing though, because I thought it was chapter 1. Alright, the rise of the Tsarist Empire. Alright, let's see. The rise of the Tsarist Empire. So, and how are you guys, everybody? How's everybody? Everybody's good? Alright. Tsarist Russia, the Jardame of Russia, and the hangman of Asia, was the most paradoxical of the great empires of modern times. Culturally the most backwards of the European nations, it produced some of the world's greatest writers and social reformers, among them such literary giants as Pushkin, like Dumas, of African descent. Can you imagine that? He actually said that too, that's funny. Lermontov, Gogol, Turgenev, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Chekhov, Gorky, such important social figures as Kropotkin, Bakunin, Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, and many others. Industrially, Tsarist Russia was the least developed of the imperialist powers, yet it produced the most revolutionary proletariat, the first to make a successful social revolution. Itself a semi-colony of foreign finance capital, chiefly French, Russia was one of the most aggressive imperialist nations, constantly expanding its frontiers, right up to the very collapse of the empire. Foreign participation in Russian industry and finance were very great. 11 of the leading banks were represented by foreign capital, 5 French, 4 German, and 2 British. The most important of Russia's metalworks were in the hands of French capitalists, and all about. See, that's why the French, and that's why everybody else is so interested, is because, like, essentially, if you have a factory, you want that factory to bring you profit. You want that factory to do what it's supposed to do, which is to manufacture. And if somebody else takes over the land and the administration and the government of that factory, right? Then you have a deep interest in maintaining, in returning those people into power who were who actually allowed you to exploit, the masses as you did, Alright. Anyway, so in all, about 3/4, 72% of the metal industry depended on foreign capital. The same was true of the coal industry of the Donets Basin. Oil fields owned by British and French capital accounted for about half the oil output of the country. A considerable part of the profits of Russian industry flowed into foreign banks, chiefly British and French. All their circumstances, in addition to the thousands of millions borrowed by the Tsar from France and Britain in loans, chained Tsardom, taught that labor. Oh, they repeated the page. Okay. They repeated the page. That's weird. I was like, what? That's remarkably familiar to that labor British. What in the world? Hold on a second. I feel like they repeated the page, but I can't tell. All right, so the Tsardom to British and French imperialism and converted Russia into a tributary or semi-colony of the countries. Besides the part played by the foreign capital in Russian history, Russia's national debt had naturally to be considered as well. In 1910, national debt, at least 62.45% of the total national indebtedness, amounting to 9 milliard rubles, was represented by foreign loans. France's share alone being from at least 9 to 10 milliard francs, Germany's from 2 to 3 milliards, and those of England, Holland, and Austria, Hungary, etc., smaller, but still quite considerable sums. So you see that other nations also loan to, so they want to get their loans back, you know? And when you go to war with these other nations, what you're doing is you're really trying to secure the loans of these nations in a sense, you know? I mean, that's obviously a part of it. It's not the entirety of it, but that's a part of it. The service of the Russians' debt weighed more heavily on the national finances than those of the other great powers and would in the long run have proved too much for the country's resources. At the same time, this Eurasian colossus with feet of clay stretched itself out over more than half of Europe and a third of Asia, extending from Poland to the west to the Bering Straits in the far east, a distance of 5,700 miles from the Arctic and the north to the Caspian and Black Seas in the south, and the frontiers of Persia, Afghanistan, and Mongolia in the southeast, a distance of 2,660 miles at the widest point. So again, this is like the largest country in the world. Within this enormous area, there dwelt almost 175 different races and nationalities at every stage of cultural and social development, from the semi-civilized nomads of the Siberian plain and the primitive tribes of the Central Asian steppes living under patriarchal feudal conditions, up to the most culturally advanced Finns, Poles, and Baltic peoples, part of the Western European civilization. No other empire, with the possible exception of the British Empire, was ever based upon such a medley of races. History, therefore, could not have chosen a more appropriate milieu than Tsarist Russia for the experiment in interracial relations which the Soviet governments had undertaken since the revolution, and the precedent has set in the solution of national minority and colonial problems. First of all, how was it that this colossal empire covering 8,250,000 square miles of territory evolved as an ever-expanding empire of peasants and horsemen? Russia had pushed eastward into Siberia, southward towards Constantinople, and westward towards the Baltic, long before the fever of modern imperialism infected Western Europe. Russia's early expansion was the work of restless frontiersmen seeking new homes in virgin lands, of ambitious Tsars seeking warm water outlets and windows to the west. It was not the imperialism of surplus manufacture, surplus capital, or national pride. But in the late 19th century, though Russia as a whole remained agricultural, great industries developed in Russian cities, capitalists arose, and imperialist doctrines, identical with those of Western Europe, gained currency among the ruling class. Capitalist projects for railway construction in Manchuria, capitalist interests in Persia, intensified the historic aggressiveness of Russia. French financiers, about 1890, supplied for Russian imperialism surplus capital, which Russia herself lacked. For instance, the Russian Asiatic Bank, the agent of Russian imperialism in the Far East, was financed with French capital. The conquest and consolidation of the Russian Empire falls into two distinct historical periods. First, the feudal period before the abolition of serfdom in 1861, when most of the territories to the west and southeast of the Moscow princedom were acquired, and second, the imperialist epoch of 19th century capitalism, during which the Trans-Caucasian border regions, the Central Asian colonies, and the maritime provinces of Siberia were conquered. This second period of aggressive Lebensraum brought Russia into direct conflict with British imperialism in Central Asia and the Middle East, and with Japanese imperialism in the Far East. The latter clash of imperialist interests culminated in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. During the period of Russia's expansion into Central Asia, war with Britain was only just averted on several occasions. It was only in 1907 that the two powers composed their differences at the expense of Persia, which was divided into spheres of influence. So it's pretty interesting to recall and to remember too, or to notice that the Russian Empire was expanding, notwithstanding the fact that it didn't have the capitalist model in a sense. didn't have the industrialism until much later. And then even so, and this kind of tells you what it means for us as people, for us, as we look at Africa as the new frontier in a sense. That realistically speaking, if you do have a certain amount of land, you do want to expand, what would be your good administration, your good government throughout Africa. And this is just the normal behavior of a people. This is the normal behavior of people. There were empires in Africa long before there were nations. Well, not long before there were nations, but modern nations. And because of that, we have to understand that, and I think some people actually wanted to like really notice that, when they said there were 175 different races, and not just that, each of these people, each of these nationalities had their own languages, but we only know Russia to speak Russian, and so that reality being that, even though there are still maybe so many languages in Russia, the reality would be that, there still is an administrative language, and that's really what we have to, urge ourselves towards. That is, if you want to participate in the administration of a nation, you want to have a common language for that administration, and why it's so important, very important for us as Africans, if we're really serious about doing what we need to do, that we actually do commit ourselves towards learning the languages that are otherwise being neglected. So Ivan IV, better known as the Terrible or the Dread, a contemporary of Queen Elizabeth, was the first of the Muscovite autocrats to assume the title of Tsar, which is Caesar, I guess, in 1547. Ivan conquered the Tatar Khanate of Kazan on the Middle Volga in 1552 to celebrate which he built the Cathedral of St. Basil on Moscow's Red Square, one of the most beautiful churches in Russia, a land of magnificent churches. Seeking an outlet to the southeast, Ivan reached in 1556 as far as Astrakhan, outpost of the Golden Horde, which was the name given to the western part of the Mongol Empire founded by Genghis Khan. This conquest brought Russia to the gateway of the Caspian. During Ivan IV's reign, great Russian trade continued to extend eastward. Cossacks and colonists crossed the Urals and began to open up Siberia. By these means, the Moscow boyars created for themselves stable markets and secure roads, founded trading centers and commercial institutions, and succeeded in close cooperation with the state in constructing for themselves and for the Tsardom a system of economic exploitation of the colonial territories, which though extensive, was coherent. Ivan also looked towards the west. The Livonian military orders and Teutonic Knights, Poland and Sweden, were waged to break through the Baltic and establish commercial ranks with Europe. The process of widening out eastward. So this is actually not that interesting. This is like just a bunch of history. The process of. So I don't know if I should actually. Let me see. So I mean, like, if you're really interested in the history of Russia, Ivan and all that, then maybe you should check it out. I mean, I know you guys like when I'm reading you this stuff. But this is like family. Like this is the trouble with our people, that we start reading things. I mean, this might hold something in it, but it doesn't seem like it does. This is talking about the conquest. Like, you can read the subtitles, which is a good thing about some books, that they tell you the subtitles. So the Far East Conquest and yada yada. So he's really going in like, okay, this was when they're fighting Japan, Caucasian and Central Asian annexations. So he's talking about Russia going into Southeast. So this is actually not that interesting. So let's see if there's another part that goes, how the Tsar governed the colonial empire. So he's talking about how the Tsar governed the colonial empire. So let me just say, right, it starts off, this looks like it might be interesting. So ethnographically, the Russian Empire embraced the greatest variety of people ever included with a single political unit. White, brown, yellow, and even black. Here's a one here. Oh, African slaves were imported. Okay, thanks. Thank you. Alright, they were all incorporated within the vast agglomeration. Almost 175 ethnic groups were analyzed at one time by the Russian Academy of Science. Into 10 major divisions, they comprised Indo-Europeans, 36 groups, Caucasians, now classified as Japhetic. So Japhetic, what does Japhetic mean? I want you guys to know what Japhetic means. Japhet is the third son of Noah. Okay, so the racial groups in the Bible or in the Old Testament, if you will, in the Judaic Christian tradition, the racial groups are the three sons of Noah. The three sons of Noah being Ham, Ham. I want to say Set. No, not Set. Shem. I think it's Shem. Yeah, Shem, and then Japhet. Okay, so Ham, which are the Hamites, those are considered the Africans. Shem or the Shemites, those are considered the mixed race, and Japhet, which is Japhet, which are the Japhetic, those are considered, as you can see, the Caucasians. You see what I'm saying? So Shem is Semites, semi-African, semi-white, and then and so most of the people in the Bible would be considered the Semitics. So here you can see Semites. So yeah, there's Hamites, which would be the Africans, and they're the first people, and they're also the first son of Noah. And what else can you say about that? Oh yeah, they're the four kids of Noah would be the four initial kingdoms of Africans, and this would obviously be history that the ancient Egyptians told the Africans, and told the people, told the Semites, which is that the first kid being Ethiopia, the second kid being Egypt. Of course, they have different names like Mizraim and so on and so forth. And then the third kid maybe being Phoenicia, and the fourth kid being Palestine. So that in the Bible they will tell you the four sons. So that's probably the only interesting thing about the Noah story. Maybe the only interesting thing about the religious text, to be honest. But yeah, that's just a fun little detail. So Japhetics for the Turks, Mongols, Tungus, Manchurian, Paleo-Asiatics, Samoyeds, Finns, and Semites. See, Semites, right? In addition, there were groups of tribes from the Far East with an ancient culture. The Russian Empire was therefore racially as well as geographically Eurasian rather than European, the Turkic tribes occupying the most important role after the Slavs. The national elements included Great Russians, White Russians, Ukrainians or Little Russians, Georgians, Turks, Armenians, Uzbekians, Turkmens, Tajiks, Tartars, Kazakhs, these names, Kyrgyzians, alright, whatever. Administration of the Tsarist Empire was one of the most patchwork kind. There was no defined policy regarding the political status of the territories, such as one finds in the British Empire, dominions, colonies, protectorates, mandates, with scant heed for the special needs of the ethnical groups, either culturally, politically, or economically, except to use them to play one section off against another in pursuance of old imperialist policy, or divide and rule. Tsarism, for administrative purpose, just lumped the imperial territories under 5 major divisions: Russia proper, Finland, Grand Duchy, Caucasia, Siberia in the Far East, and Central Asia. So instead of ruling like the British do, which is, this is a dominion, this is a colony, this is a protectorate, and this is a mandate, they just say, you're all just, here's 5 territories, and this is something to understand too. Like when we talk about Pan-Africanism and the unity of Africa, a lot of times, like this is essentially one of the ways. And obviously, you don't really want to copy the Tsar colonial government. You might not even want to copy the Soviet Union per se. But it's just to say that there are other models that are out there. But again, like I said,
Like what?
What's up?
Like what?
Like what? Oh, I'm just saying the Soviet Union and the Russian and the Tsarist Russia. Like there are other models.
Like what?
Alright, anyway. So Siberia and the Far East. No, I'm saying these are the 2 other models.
Oh, man.
Yeah. This guy, like what? Anyway. So I'm just going to jump through this because, I'm realizing that this is not...
What is this about? I just don't know.
Yeah, this is about... Yeah, this is about Russia and thing. So I want you guys to look at this book. It only looks like it's it looks like part 1 of the book, but I want you to look at. I mean, you don't have to though.
What pictures at?
Huh? What'd you say?
What are pictures at?
Where the pictures at? I think there's some pictures. I don't actually. But all right, economic imperialism, followed by no means unique principle of keeping the colonial areas backwards, are them only to produce raw material for the industries of the European section of the empire. Thus, rich and fertile lands were neglected and allowed to fall into the extremities of poverty. Okay, this is interesting. Economic imperialism. Such raw materials as were easily accessible were transferred west. European imperialism in Africa, while almost as circumscribed an outlook as Tsarism, has, in the interest of finance capital, supported the building of railroads, construction of docks, and opening up of mines. Railways in Tsarist Russia, outside of the metropolitan centers of the European Russia, and the great imperialist arteries like the Trans-Siberian, the Trans-Caspian, the Orenburg, were practically non-existent. Where they were built, they were designed purely for military purposes. Up to 1913, the Russian railway mileage covered 73,000 kilometers, compared with 500,000 in the United States during the same period. Corvée forced labor was used for building military roads as part of the imperialist expansion in Central Asia. The primitive tribes of Siberia were rounded up for work on the Trans-Siberian Railway and other military construction. Even up to the time of the Revolution, the Central Asian colonies were far more backward politically, culturally, and economically than British Africa, with all the disadvantages of Western imperialist rule in that continent. So that's actually pretty interesting. So they're saying that. So this is the thing that we have to realize, that when we talk about the administration of our nations in Africa, we a lot of times we say, oh, they're so backwards, but the reality is that a lot of yeah, they are, and the reality is that a lot of times all over the world, a lot of people have backwards administration. One of the things that
when I would justification for our backwards administration.
All right, hold on a second. So one of the things that I say, one of the times when I was in the UAM, what he was in the UAM, the attorney at war, obviously, Alton Maddox Jr. would tell us that one of the things that the founders of America were doing was that they were studying nature. They studied, let's say, botany. They studied, like plants. They studied so on and so forth. And in those studies, they kind of derived some stuff about the administration of their lands and their peoples and so on and so forth. This is not something that is common, throughout the world. And so a lot of times, not to give Americans too much credit, and obviously, maybe exactly, maybe Alton Maddox might have been giving white people too much credit, but. And of course, Garvey also.
Too much, bro.
Come again?
You boosted them too much.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe Garvey kind of does that boosting as well. But it behooves us to not take into account that, realistically speaking, on occasion there are times when you want to. Yeah, you have to recognize that you might not have the best people in administration at the moment, and that it doesn't take much for somebody to be better at administration,
The bar is so low. You only go but up.
Yeah. So you see here in Tsarist Russia, like the reality is that you want to. All right. I even as you say, like here's the thing that you want to understand about all like the Americans, the original Americans in a sense, is that they all kind of gave deep respect to Kemet, to ancient Africa, and
indirectly.
You said directly?
Indirectly.
No, I mean like if you look at George Washington's gravesite, he's surrounded by Tekkens, Tekken is what people call an obelisk in America, right? So, and that's like that big long thing. If you look at Thomas Jefferson's gravesite, there's a Tekken there. Maybe even Benjamin Franklin. Like a lot of them were.
A lot of those like founding fathers, air quotes, were a lot of those like society, Masonic society.
Yeah, exactly.
In them, they focus on lots of those old teachings, whether it's Greek, Rome, etc., etc.
Yeah,
so,
like
I'm
the.
not really surprised to hear that.
Yeah, the quote unquote Masons, if you will. So what the Masons are is essentially like essentially if you understand. All right, like say it this way. In Africa we had lodges. Okay, one of the most common places to learn something deeply was in a lodge. And a lodge would just basically be like depends on what subject you're talking about, but let's say you're talking about blacksmithing. A lodge would be like a blacksmithing lodge would be where the Africans would get together and discuss blacksmithing together, and perfect their art and keep it secret in a sense, right? So
even the writing. I think it's in Simbiri, in let's say, well, modern day Nigeria now. The way the writing skill was taught, but even some of the ones that were known then were known to the public community. Only certain guilds, only certain people that would just trade like those secrets.
Yeah. So that's one thing that you have to. That's one thing we have to remember, that the Masons, in a sense, are a lodge. So a lodge for the administration of, or for the building of a people, in a sense. And so Africa had the same thing, even contemporarily with America. The only thing is that the question becomes now, if the leadership isn't chosen from these lodges, then you can't necessarily expect the leadership to be on par with what you would get from the leadership that comes from a lodge. And so a lot of these Wazungu do come from lodges.
Part of the solution is to have lodges again, essentially.
Well, that's the thing. The reality being that we have lodges. Even when we came to America, there were lodges.
Sure.
Well, yeah, that's the case. So but the question being is the real concern is that you want the leadership to go through some sort of training, and the reality being that some sort of training towards being in that vein. Now, did Tsarist Russia go through that training? Did the Tsar of Russia go through that training? Possibly not, right? Does the president of so and so country go through that training? Obviously not, right? Now, what you want to do is then set up lodges, because even when I talk about Waset, Waset would be the Grand Lodge in Africa that a lot of the leadership of Africa had gone to in the distant past, So such people as like the Yoruba, if you will, would have attended Waset, or just as we know that most of the Greek philosophers attended Waset, and so they come through with this deep thinking. They come through with this idea of administration. They come through with these fundamental ideas on society and community. Where if you look at Europe, obviously, or Greece, Plato comes up with this idea of the republic. Solon comes up with this idea of democracy. But these people have studied in Waset in ancient Africa, and so what you see in the African context, on the African side, or what's underreported would be what Oludumare goes to Waset, and we know this, right? And other such people in Africa's history, and they become that leadership class. So it's really important for us to set up another Waset, because when you see the failures of a people to actually do something for themselves, it really comes from a lack of preparation. And that's really, that's where we can step in and change that fate. All right. So, let's say this is a part explained by the fact that the Russians themselves enjoy no democratic liberties. Because of the democratic tradition in Britain, there's always been liberal and humanitarian elements among the British people, expressing themselves through parliament and public life, support of the colonial peoples. It is not that these people are fundamentally opposed to imperialism. They are not. But they would rather see colonization of the liberal trusteeship kind in the place of die-hard Tory imperialism. They consider that the same ends can thereby be achieved more effectively. So, all right, this is actually pretty interesting. So he's talking about how the British are mentally predisposed, and the idea that they do not necessarily oppose colonization, but they prefer their colonization. They prefer the colonial activities to be in the terms of trusteeships, as opposed to like die-hard Tory imperialism. Yeah, and so see, Tory would be their word for Republican, whereas the other one, I forget the other party they have, but they have another party.
Lanes.
Huh?
Lanes.
Lanes?
Yeah.
That's the one that opposes the Tories? I don't know what it's called, but there's another party. Maybe somebody British is listening. Or somebody in Britain is listening. Alright. Let's see. Tory imperialism. Yeah, so their influence had been used in endeavor to curb the extravagance of the imperialism and the more brutal manifestations of capitalism in the colonial empire. Yeah, and barely. Just say barely because of what was happening in Kenya, Since there was the complete absence of such restraining influence in Tsarist Russia, held the absence of democratic liberties and free parliamentary institutions, there existed no liberalizing tendencies to counter excessive abuses against the colonial peoples of the Russian Empire. Even the left-wing parties, with the single exception of the Bolsheviks, paid scant attention to the problems of the colonial peoples of the empire, and even they, functioning as they did under conditions of illegality, were in no position to help secure reforms for the subject peoples or to obtain from them. Even some limited concessions are granted from time to time to Indians, Africans, and other colonial peoples by the British Empire. Wyszynski, a Russian sociologist closely acquainted with the lives of the Kalmucks, wrote in his diary in the 1885 that, compared with the Kalmuk, a Russian peasant lived like a prince. So even so extremely dire were the conditions of the oppressed population of Central Asia that before the revolution, many of them were dying out. So the Russians had like really poor administration, and that's the thing that we have to realize, that a lot of us, tend to whine and complain about the Western world, but from the paradigm of having had secured civil rights now, it becomes okay. You know what I mean? Like okay, you're not.
There's a word for it.
You said what?
There's a phrase for it.
Oh, what is the phrase?
First world problems.
Oh yeah, first world problems. Yeah, I know. A lot of us have first world problems. We're like, man, the line for voting is so damn long. You're like, okay. Like, yeah, okay. Whereas everybody else is like,
my AC did not turn on in 5 minutes.
Exactly. Like we complain about things like that.
My internet is so slow.
Exactly. Yeah, this stupid internet is so slow. I can't see my cat videos.
My phone takes 30 minutes to charge.
But look, white people got more like white people take what is it called, first world problems to the next level. I tell you, I'm in a bookstore. Yeah. We talking like bookstore stuff.
My coffee is warm and not hot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There was somebody who sued for the coffee being too hot. They actually won. Huh? No, they sued McDonald's. They were like
because their coffee was too hot.
Yeah, their coffee was too hot, and they actually won. They actually won. Yeah, it was.
Oh wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, I know what I'm gonna do.
Well, I don't think you can do it again. I think they got protections against it now. But.
Come up.
Yeah. All right, man. All right. There was no direct contact between the Russian people and more primitive colonial populations, except where Russians were banished or took refuge in Siberia. All right. So let's just skip over that. Interracial discourse.
Siberia is like a tundra, so I can see problems with famine a lot in Russia, as it was.
Famines in Russia? Yeah, of course. Well, I mean,
yeah.
But that depends on.
Siberia is like in the Arctic.
Yeah, but that depends on your use of industrialization. You could easily give everybody a heater. Obviously, that's super pollution, but you could easily do that. It's just a matter of what's your concern.
19th century.
19th century. Yeah, you can still do that.
Yeah, the only way you can get there is on a horse, and a horse can't take all that snow and ice.
No. Back in the 19th century, you could catch a train. The point was that
they just said they didn't have
exactly. That's the point. Like they purposely didn't develop the rest of the nation, and that's always going to be a problem. That's the problem that we find in Africa today, where we're like, hey, if you want, like for instance, I saw people complaining about Ghana or whatever, and they were like particularly Accra, and they no, anyway, and they were they're playing about Accra. And they were saying, how unaffordable it is, how this, Accra, yeah. They're playing.
So you saying okra?
Yeah, sure, man. You mean, actually, you know what, man? There's a video of, Jamaicans and Nigerians and other people saying things different, But I'm usually saying things right, so I'm not going to.
Nah, you're probably saying them wrong. That's crazy.
Exactly. Like, no, but I do English words pretty good. All right. Anyway.
No. Also word.
I do what?
No. Also.
Yeah, I know you're not saying that. Anyway, look. So apparently right here they're gonna talk about Jews and the Jews were the most violently treated. But this is because, like I said,
your strain taken down.
Dorothy Pizer. No, I'm saying Dorothy Pizer said, "Man, you can't take down something that's already on the ground, man. Come on."
Yeah, you're right.
You can't. Ain't no down, man. You know what I'm saying? Ain't no down to go. The social exclusion, role of the Orthodox Church, cultural backwardness. So the absence of any native intelligentsia among the Asiatic peoples, left them isolated from the progressive current of the Western civilization, and tended to leave the semi-feudal superstructure intact. While European rule in many parts of Africa also tries to maintain the tribal and semi-feudal forms of society, it has been obliged to create some kind of educated class which will provide native clerks and government functionaries able to cope with the commercial and administrative needs of the colonies. So this is what's really important. Like when the Wazungu goes to Europe, he takes these Africans, he takes African people, and he provides them with he's obliged to create among them an educated class which become the native clerks and governing functionaries. You see, he does this, but again, that's not necessarily the lodge like level education. You know, it's to go about with the commercial and administrative needs of the colonies. You know, and that commercial and administrative need of the colonies, that's really what you find in Africa today. You know, that's what you find in Africa today. Now, of course, it's going to tell you that in Tsarist Russia, they didn't even care about that. Blah blah blah. They were, and look, see, the colonial was so corrupt, the general economic and social level was so backward that the needs never arose. You know, and this is incredibly important. I want you to understand this, that colonial Russia, Tsarist Russia, is what you see in Africa today. You understand? So basically, what you're reading here is essentially where Africa headed to after, like this is basically colonialism versus neocolonialism. You know? Like, but really, Tsarist Russia itself was a colony of French interests, but they were just a poorly managed colony, and maybe that's because it was French interest. No, I'm joking.
But Russia is a very big country, bro.
Yeah, I know, it's the biggest in the world.
And even most of Russia's not even inhabited, if I'm not mistaken, like Canada.
Yeah, Russia has a population of nearly like 200 million, but it's the largest country in the world. You know, so yeah, a lot of it is uninhabited, a lot of it is so on and so forth. But the point being that, like right here, it says the colonial administration in Central Asia and Siberia was so corrupt, and the general economic and social level so backward that the need never arose. The need never arose to have an educated class which would provide for the commercial and administrative needs of the colonies. That's to say that, like, when you go to these African nations, what are the young people doing? What are the young people up to? What are they being trained to do? Oh, look at this. It says descendants of the assassins. What the freak? Oh, some sort of.
You're talking about Russia, though.
Yeah, what the Russians? Yeah, what the Russians? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm talking about Africa in the sense of, like what are we doing? Like, what is the leadership of who is the leadership of Africa preparing to be the future leadership of Africa?
Afrobeat.
Afrobeat?
Yeah.
Who's that?
Afrobeat.
Afrobeat? Oh, the youth of Africa are doing Afrobeat?
Yeah.
I guess. Okay. Alright, so imperialism is fundamentally a retarding factor in the industrial development of the colonial areas. European capitalists, however, have in their own interests made some progress in developing mining, agricultural plantations, and small-scale industries in many African territories. So he's kind of like low-key bigging up the imperialism of Africa for some reason. But he's really trying to...
Is this a cracker anyway?
Is this a cracker?
Yeah.
George Padmore? No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, George Padmore.
I just hopped on, bro. I just came on. I'm busy all day.
Yeah. All right, man. It's okay, man.
I see a whole bunch of Russia stuff, so I assume they white.
No. George Padmore is considered like he's a Pan-Africanist. So.
Oh, okay.
He's a Pan-Africanist, and you know how they are. All right. And it's like the traditional Pan-Africanist. No. This is the traditional Pan-Africanist. This is not.
I don't know.
Like essentially.
I said what I said.
Yo, why black people always say that stuff? Alright, so chapter 3, finally. How Lenin solved the colonial question. So let's see if there's a solution here. So, no nation can be free if it oppresses other nations. So, the statement of Marx and Engels, the founders of scientific socialism, is a clear formulation of the fundamental principle of self-determination for colonial peoples, the implementation of which Lenin, their greatest disciple, achieved in 1917. This achievement still remains one of the most astounding successes of the Russian Revolution, and provides a living example to the British, American, French, Dutch, and other imperialist nations still faced with the task of finding a solution to their colonial and national minority problems. Realizing that the socialists cannot reach their great aim without fighting against any form of national oppression, Lenin and his followers not only made themselves the champions of the Russian workers and peasants, but but consistently advocated the liberation of all the non-Russian peoples of the Tsarist Empire, regardless of their degree of social and cultural development. The socialist of a great country or a nation possessing colonies who does not defend their right is a chauvinist, taught Lenin. To defend this right does in no way mean to encourage the formation of small states, but on the contrary, it leads to a freer, more fearless, and therefore wider and more universal form of government and unions of government, a phenomenon more advantageous for the masses and more in accord with the economic development. The correctness of this political principle is proved by the solidarity of the Soviet peoples in the present crisis. Furthermore, its rightness and the need for its extension is observable in the aspirations of the people of the smaller European states to political independence, now being expressed in the current plans for federated groups on the continent. So bureaucracy used the church in holding down the masses. Not for nothing. They decided to reprint the same page twice in a row for some reason. All right.
When you photocopy a bunch of pages, you're gonna make a mistake. It's okay.
Nah, I wouldn't. All right. But let us see how the many diverse nationalities of the Tsarist Empire were compounded into an economic and national unity with the Russian people to form a multinational state to be known as the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR. All right. Lenin was the most realistic of idealists. To wish to bring about socialism was all very well, but he perceived the necessity to establish a party, which would be the instrument for achieving this objective. Having founded his party, the Bolsheviks, he proceeded to impregnate it with the philosophy of revolutionary Marxism. This he enriched with his own unparalleled knowledge based upon his critique of imperialism, the epic upon which he was to leave an indelible imprint. The Russian Socialist Democratic Labour Party, at a conference in London in 1903, split into two sections on the organizational issues at great moment, but the consideration of which is outside the scope of the study. From this conference, Lenin emerged as the leader of the majority section, the Bolsheviks. The other faction was known as the Mensheviks, or minority. From then until his death, Lenin was the undisputed master of his party. The division at the 1903 conference thus laid the foundation of the instrument which was not many years later to sweep imperialism from 1/6 of the earth, to open wide the gates of the prison of nations, and Lenin set about the task of infusing his followers with the will to power, a spirit entirely lacking in the British Labour Party, which has now become the appendage of Tory imperialism. Oh yeah, so that's the Labour and Tory. Those are the two different parties. So that's the thing that's important, that they start with a political party. They start with a political party. Okay, they make it into the Bolsheviks, right? Who will be the revolutionary vanguard, as you can see from the next thing. But they start putting in the work. You have to have some sort of structure before you have the structure, in a sense. You know, you want some sort of pre-structure before the structure. Before you have the nation, you want some sort of principle. You want some sort of, you want something. And the reality is that we don't have that today. We don't have that today, but we expect to have something tomorrow, and it's frankly it's ridiculous. It's like let's say Machiavelli's on the line, right? Machiavelli, do you expect, like, if things went south, or if like, could you take advantage of the opportunities that may present themselves in Africa with your current level of organization? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. And if
you don't let me answer, all right, whatever.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you want to give away all your, you know what I'm saying? If you want to give away.
No.
You're just gonna say no. I mean, when you say no, though, it makes you sound like, but yeah, but that's the point, though. Like, people, like you want to be able to take advantage, but a lot of our people are not so organized. To the point where anything happens on the continent, many of us do not take advantage of it. We don't take advantage of it, and the only people that organize to take advantage of it really are the Americans. You understand? The Americans, the British, and the French. They are organized to take advantage of these situations, of real, actual concern on the continent. And they and the people who are organized, but a lot of times the people in the Western world are not organized in any sort of real sense. In order to take advantage of things, and it's going to be the downfall. So let's say in the collapse of America, per se, right? What happens to the black people here? Do we all just suddenly get together, kumbaya, hold hands? No. You understand? To this day, there are certain neighborhoods in America that are ruled by gangs. that are ruled by gangs. Huh?
Name names.
All right, and then anyway, but I ain't no snitch. All right, no, but seriously, if America were to collapse, right? Either
Next week.
Let's say they hold the next week, right? Oh, dang, you're right. Anyway, but yeah, we mad close. All right, it is legit next week. All right, but anyway, let's say it collapses, right? These gangs then can expand. You understand? And they're going to be warring. And the reality is that someone like me doesn't have the organizational influence to like just walk into any neighborhood and say this is how we're going to start doing stuff. You understand?
They're gonna think you set tripping with that scarf.
They're gonna think of what?
You set tripping.
Oh no, I'm representing all the colors. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, no, I got your color too. I got your color too. Look right here. All right. I'm all of them. All right. Of course, you're gonna tell me that's exactly what set tripping is. But you know what? All right.
No, go ahead.
You know what? All right. Lenin's conception of the Bolsheviks was as the vanguard, the most conscious section of the working class, the industrial proletariat. But the Russian was as the vanguard. Oh yeah. But the Russian Empire, as we have seen, was overwhelmingly agricultural, with the peasants forming the preponderant majority of the population. Moreover, the subject nationalities of the empire were an integral part of the structure of Tsarism, and no solution of the social problem of the workers of Russia proper was possible, which did not include within its scope the liberation of the great masses of the colonial peoples from the yoke of imperialism. The emancipation of the Russian workers could not be separated from the agrarian revolution and the national liberation movement. The principles of self-determination was therefore woven web and warp into the fight for the social emancipation of the workers of the metropolitan country. Such an alliance between the white advanced workers in the mother country and the colored peoples in the colonial territories of the empire had never been even remotely entertained by the British labor movement. So that's it. Such an alliance, yeah. As the leaders of the British working class think not in terms of fundamental social and political change of the British imperialist system, but merely of securing reforms within the framework of the present capitalist imperialist system. And of course, the British are going to want to just secure reforms. Like at the end of the day, like it's like if you can't beat them, join them. If you can't beat them, join them. The reality being this, that a lot of times you might say, I don't like how black people vote, they don't vote for presidency. Why do you vote for, but like at the end of the day, right now, they're standing in long lines to cast a vote. You can't stop them. So if you can't stop them, then like why are you, like why don't you just use, like you have to take advantage of the situation.
You can't beat them doing it.
Exactly. You got to take advantage of the situation that you find yourself in.
Sure.
You said what?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, look, like again, I used to work for the Freedom Party, right? I was working for the Freedom Party. The Freedom Party was the third party, a black independent party. They were actually against the Democrats, allegedly, because.
You said allegedly. You want you part of that? Can't you verify?
Well, look, they were betrayed. They were betrayed by one of the leaders.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
That's
and
crazy.
so the leaders was a Democrat.
Be your own people sometimes.
It's almost always your own people. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, it's almost always your own people. But anyway, so like we were like, hey, you know what? We don't like how the Democrats only ran white people, like all white people in the middle of New York. Like for all the major positions, right? So, we didn't like that, so we gonna make our own black party, so on and so forth, right? And, we were doing what we were doing, and I was like, I was standing outside the poll site, like, hey, vote for the Freedom Party, and a brother told me, aren't we already free? I'm voting for the Democrat. And I'm voting for, like, and the Democrat, it was like the Democratic mayor, it was like Bloomberg or something, And the thing is this, that, the guy had like, oh, not Bloomberg, I don't know who it was, but, it might have been Bloomberg, right? I don't know if he was in there, but whatever.
Was that dude stop and frisk like a few years ago?
It was the governor. We were running for governor. Yeah, stop and frisk. Yeah, somebody.
Governor.
Yeah, it was the New York governor. We were doing the governor show.
The dude, his dad was a governor too.
Oh, Cuomo, right?
Yeah. Cuomo.
Yeah. So that's what we were going against. We were going against Cuomo, and it was like we were just trying to like get enough votes to be on the ballot. Like be an official party, because that's the way how you become an official party. And all that, open yourself up for this, that, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right? And yeah, black folk were just down the line. We're like, nope, we're not gonna not vote for the we're not gonna not vote for the Democrats. That's stupid. Even though the Democrats had like 100% chance of winning. You know, like the Republicans weren't even running against us. You know what I'm saying? Like the Republicans weren't even running against. It was a straight up, like a one party system, right? But they were just like, yeah. The New York governor, yeah. So even all that said, the black folk were like, nope, we're gonna vote for Cuomo, right? So like, yo, we like how his wife black, or something like that, some nonsense, right?
No, you think it's de Blasio.
Okay, I don't know. Who was running in 2011?
This is supposed to be your city, bro. How?
Right. No, that's pre-COVID, man. You know damn well ain't nobody remember nothing, man.
PC?
Yeah, that PC. Yeah, PC. Wait, don't say PC. He gonna show up,
He gonna come and say we're through.
I think he was here earlier. Hold on a second. Let me see who was 2009 governor race. New York governor. Well, I feel like it was Cuomo.
No, I thought it was Cuomo then. But Cuomo doesn't know black children.
Oh, no, I don't know what was going on. The point being that black folk was just
like a mob boss.
Yeah, black folk were just doing whatever they like we just vote. And so it's just like, if we just vote for these people, like you can't necessarily be like, you know what, I don't even know what's going on, because they're saying David Patterson. I don't even think it was David Patterson.
That's before my time.
It might have been. Or it might have been they ran against David Patterson. I don't even know. Oh yeah, maybe it was Cuomo running. Yeah. So David. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so yeah. So the point was, or the point remains that black folk, like you can't say, you know what, don't, like, you can't tell them not to vote for Democrats. So it's just like, whatever, just make the most of what they're doing on autopilot. You know what I mean? Because what? Like you're not gonna like you have to. It's like this guy says, what's his name? Adam Kane Powell Jr. He says, "What's in your hand?" What's in your hand? You have to fight with what's in your hand. Exactly. Like if you're somewhere, like you say, you only have your phone. Like let's say you only have your phone in your hand, right? Somebody's coming to attack you, right? Then just like you could be like, well, I should just bring out my machine gun. You know what I mean? But you don't got a machine gun. You just got a phone. You know what I'm saying?
Machine gun in their pocket. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you have to realize that you have a phone in your hand. So you could do like a handful of things. You could use your phone to call for help. You could use your phone as a projectile. You could use your phone as a bludgeon. You could just put your phone away. Use your fist. But the point is that you have to look at what's in your hand.
Bro.
Huh?
Gotta stay strapped.
Well, you gotta stay strapped, but the point being that you have to remember what's in your hand. Like if your people are going to vote down the line for the Democrats, then if you want political office, you run as a Democrat. You understand? Because they're not going to vote for you if you're not running as a Democrat.
But why?
What do you mean, but why? Because we're
for those that don't know.
No,
your audience.
No, there's no explanation. This is just reality. It's just like it's just a reality. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you're just faced with reality. Like, what are people actually doing? They're voting down the line for Democrats. They don't actually look up, like most people who vote don't look up the different candidates. I mean, like even me, I don't even know who's running for my freaking. I don't even know. I mean, we already voted for them, honestly, in the primaries, so it wouldn't really change from the primaries. Like, whoever won the primaries, that's what I'm saying. Whoever won the primaries, then you would just vote for them in the general election. You know what I mean? Because the general election is between your party and the other party.
I know, but what if you're not affiliated with either party?
Well, if you're not affiliated with either party, then you can, vote however you want. But like most black people are in the Democratic Party. Like most black people are registered in the Democratic Party. Well, because if you're registered in the party, then you can participate in the primaries.
I don't know why the Democratic Party.
Oh, the Democratic Party gave you civil rights. You know what I mean? And the Republican Party is like trying to take them away. So.
What happened? In 1865.
Oh, that was the Republican Party.
So.
Well, they switched over in the 1960s because of the civil rights. Because of like around Dr. King and them. But before that, they were Republicans. Because of slavery and all that. Huh?
Lyndon B. Johnson. Was he was he a proponent of civil rights, by himself, or was it, by some doings of other forces?
I don't know what you're talking about, man. But I don't want to get too much off the subject of what's this called? Capitalist imperialism in Russia. You know what I mean?
No, we talk about Russia again?
Yeah. So such a lines between. Huh?
What?
Alright. Such an alliance between the white advanced workers in the mother country and the colored peoples in the colonial territories of the empire had never been even remotely entertained by the British labor movement. As the leaders of the British working class think not in terms of fundamental. Yeah. So I'm saying that's this is typical of people of any people. Consequently, they look upon the colonial empire as a necessary adjunct to the industrialized metropolis in which they function. Out of this conception, there is now issuing a new school of Fabian reformers who are propagating the fallacy that all the subject races of the colonial. Wait, what'd you say?
Sending get you hooked on phonics.
Yeah. No, Metropolis is like it's like a city in. That's like comic book stuff. You have to know that from comic books. Isn't that where like Superman is from or something? I don't know. Actually, I don't know. No, I don't know what that's at. What is Metropolis? I don't know. But see, it's like Metro, and then you're like, because I'm like from New York, so you see Metro, you're like, oh, Metro, the Metro car. Oh wait, Metropolis, gotcha. America, I mean, English is not phonetic. You know what I mean?
Just go on, bro.
No, it's not phonetic. That's why you can't do the hooked on phonics excuse, because the phonics relies on phonetics, and this is not. Like I said, Metro card. Okay, we don't say Metro card. Metro card. Alright. A new school of Fabian reformers who are propagating the fallacy that all the subject races of the colonial empire need and want is bigger and better colonial development and welfare schemes to be carried out by the same Whitehall bureaucrats and colonial proconsuls who for centuries have kept the native peoples in their place, while British capitalists, traders, settlers, industrialists have exploited their land cheap unorganized labor. So this is really important. This book is from the 1940s, and they're talking about the same thing we're talking about, which is welfare schemes and better colonial development. You understand? The same thing we're talking about.
Better colonial development?
Yeah. It's in like this is like in 1940s rhetoric though.
I know, but he's saying we talk about the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing, but it's just different rhetoric. Like colonial development would be like, oh, improve the hood. You know what I mean?
National, okay.
Yeah, we want better things in the hood, Or we want a developed hood, we want better schools in the hood, and blah 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 blah. It's the same thing. It's just.
It's all good in the hood, man.
Huh? Well, the hood is just a colony. You know what I mean? But we don't call it a colony, but it's just a colony. Socialist humbug of this kind was firmly repudiated by Lenin and his followers, who addressed themselves to the task of working out a concrete program of action for solving the colonial question in the Tsarist empire down to its roots. In the process of probing the national minority and colonial question in order to establish where lay its roots and what gave rise to the oppressive conditions which are an inseparable concomitant of all colonial systems, Lenin found it necessary to explore the ramifications of finance capital as it operated on a world scale. Out of his studies, based largely upon the writings of Rudolf Herdelings and J.A. Hobson, came that great work, Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Capitalism has become international monopolies, have been established on a worldwide scale, and colonial and semi-colonial countries like Africa, India, China, etc. were being used for the investment of surplus finance capital. Imperialism had evolved as the final stage of capitalist development. Beyond imperialism, it could not go. There can be no ultra or super imperialism, a theory followed by the German social democratic theoretician Karl Kautsky. The truth of Lenin's analysis has been amply demonstrated by the latest development of the monopoly capitalism in Germany and Italy, where vested interests threw off the mask of parliamentary government and set up openly terroristic fascist dictatorships. So he's talking about fascism. By this means, they hope to arrest the forward march of social progress and prevent the transition from monopoly capitalism or imperialism to socialism. Fascism, see, that's another thing. They believe that capitalism and imperialism leads to socialism, so it's kind of weird. Fascism is the counter-revolution of the bourgeoisie, established in anticipation of the social revolution. It is not, as has been asserted in some quarters, another stage in development of capitalism. This theory was given the lie by the breakdown of the fascist regime in Italy under the impact of the present war. The facts reveal that the monopoly capitalists and large agrarians were the power who pulled the strings behind the seemingly unseatable dictator Mussolini. Imperialism is either its democratic or fascist form, means oppression and the subjugation of hundreds of millions of people of different nationalities throughout the world. Opposition to it, Lenin emphasized, must therefore be organized on an international scale, but where the imperialist chain was weakest, there it would break first. Tsarist imperialism was regarded by Lenin as so corrupt and decaying that all of the imperialism is where it was the most rotten. There he was certain that the international imperialist chain would break first. Thus the national and colonial question of capital importance as a tactical issue was equally important as a basic fundamental. So this is actually really important. So he's saying, look, you attack a system at its weakest link. So his belief is that imperialism subjects hundreds of millions of people around the world of different nationalities to it, right? And he's saying, look, it's organized on an international scale. Lenin emphasized opposition must therefore be organized on an international scale. So you want to fight it on an international scale, but particularly target where it's weakest. And he said
this was in the 40s, right?
Yeah.
So when I was reading, so it's funny because decades later you see what happened, especially on the continent in Latin America as well.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? The thing is that it continues.
Cuba, Venezuela.
Exactly, it continues to this day that imperialism is best attacked, in, let's say, on the continent of Africa. It's better attacked on the continent of Africa, if you're talking about for African people, than it is in the heart of it, where it's most securely manifested. It's most securely manifested. And that's in the West, in the Western democracy. So that's really something that I think we don't really emphasize enough, and that's actually pretty interesting. That and to see the corrupt and decaying imperialism and rotten imperialism. This is what's happening. So like right now, for instance, this brother could tell you, Nigeria, they're having this uproar about the corruption. They're having this uproar about the decaying of Nigeria. But again, the idea has to be, who are the radicals on the ground that would make for a transformed community or can transform society in Nigeria? And the reality is that, well, besides Mafia Young, obviously. Although I think she's located in Ghana. But the thing is that, who's organized for that? And why isn't it us? Except for Machiavelli. Why isn't it us? Why isn't it us? Because that's what happened with Lenin. I tell you, Lenin wasn't. He was in exile. He was in whatever. But when the Russian Revolution was popping off, like when there was an opportunity in February, he showed up in October. He showed up in February. So now there's an opportunity in SARS, and everyone in the West is kind of just hashtag. And then when Buhari and them take maintain and control it and are able to do their reforms, everything's gonna settle back, right? Everything's gonna settle back, or potentially, or it can come into it can go in another direction, another coup, another so on and so forth. But the reality being that what you would want is for what you would want to be there, and if what you want is for what you want to be there, then you have to be there yourself, and you should have been organized yesterday to come about with that kind of solution. Because right now, let's say if we do say, oh well, Buhari, he loses his power, right? It could be lost to a military dictatorship. It could be lost to fascists, as they call it. Because the fascists are constantly organized. It could be lost to American interests. It could be lost to French interests. It could be lost to German interests. It could be lost to Russian interests. Doesn't matter. The point being that if you're not organizing a Pan-African interest, a Pan-Africanist interest organization, group, Kata Wakata, right? Gonna get beat up from all the gangs. He said, "Oh my gosh, rainbow flag! What the? Gonna get me beat up." All right, now brother's in brother bit of medicine. He's misinterpreting the scarf thing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, ain't no rainbow. All right. You said yikes?
Yeah, some John Taylor's on me. What's going on?
Nah, man, I don't know where he got that from. Gonna get you beat up from all the gangs. I think he meant many colors though. Maybe he's in his science speech. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Alright, I don't know, man. Alright, the strengthening of the nationalist aspirations of the component parts of the empire strategically undermined the imperialist foundation. Oh, the set tripping thing. That's what it was. The strengthening of the nationalist aspirations of the component parts of the empire strategically undermined the imperialist foundations. The open and successful revolt of the colonial countries against the imperial countries decides this breakup. The metropolitan masses and the masses of the colonial countries have therefore an identical objective with indissoluble links their fate: the overthrow of the common imperialist oppressor. Such were the strategic deductions arrived at by Lenin and alone among the contemporary Russian left-wing parties. The Russian Social Democratic Party, the Bolsheviks, concerned themselves with the colonial and national question as it operated on the international arena, and it was precisely in connection with this problem that Lenin's statesmanship was to be proved so correct. All the other parties, the Cadets, the Mensheviks, the Socialist Revolutionaries, were bankrupt as far as the colonial question was concerned. Among the Bolsheviks, there was an ex-theological student from Georgia, Joseph whatever his name is, now known as the world as that's Russia. I mean, that's Stalin. Dang. Okay.
You have a teacher that name? Was one of your teachers, your physics teachers like that?
What? No. Joseph. What? No. What?
I don't know. I'm just saying.
Dang, man, you know, you sound like you. I was like, what? Is that it? Yeah, you know, damn, I would have got that right. You know, he was so cute. Like, he put all them kick like he put all that shit. Alright, and the second leader of the Soviet Union. He was entrusted by Lenin with the task of clarifying the party's attitude on the national and colonial question and its propaganda, and it was not accidental that he became its leading theoretician on the problem of subject nationalities. Himself a native of a colonial area, unlike most of the leaders of the October Revolution, he had first-hand knowledge of imperialist oppression as it was practiced upon an inferior race. So that's really interesting. So Stalin comes from these... So when they say the colonial question, they're talking about, you know, essentially how Russia might have been focused in one area and the other areas were just colonies in a sense, right? The regions, the other territories are just colonies. So he's saying that, this guy Stalin becomes he's not necessarily the prototypical Russian, right? So maybe he's from Georgia or something, right? And yet he becomes the leader, you know. So it's to say that, you know, that's to say that there's no necessarily discrimination in the same sense. But of course, you know, us outside are just looking at them like white people. But you know, it is what it is. All right, himself a native of a colonial area, unlike most of the leaders of the October Revolution, and it was practiced upon an inferior race. In 1913, Stalin amplified Lenin's theories in his pamphlet Marxism and the National Question, first published in Vienna. This became the party's official handbook or guide to action. See what I'm saying? They write books laying down the principles of strategy to be adopted in solving the national and colonial question. Stalin laid the basis. Yep. All right. Stalin laid the basis of his theoretical reputation with this document, which enunciated and amplified the following Leninist thesis: the world is divided into two camps: the camp of a handful of civilized nations which possess finance capital and exploit the vast majority of the population of the globe, and the camp of the oppressed and exploited peoples of the colonies and dependent countries that comprise the majority. The colonies and the dependent countries, oppressed and exploited by finance capital, constitute an enormous reserve power and a most important source of strength for imperialism. Right? So the dependent countries are a source of strength. The revolutionary struggle of the oppressed peoples in the dependent and the colonial countries against the imperialism. So the revolutionary struggle of the oppressed peoples in the dependent and colonial countries against imperialism is the only road that leads to their emancipation from oppression and exploitation. So he's saying only revolutionary struggle can lead to emancipation from oppression and exploitation. The principal colonial and dependent countries have already entered on the path of the national liberation movement, which is bound to bring about a crisis in world capitalism. So they're already going through a national liberation. The interest of the proletarian movement in the advanced countries and of the national liberation movement in the colonies require the fusion of these two aspects of the revolutionary movement into a common front against the common enemy, imperialism. So they united around imperialism. Okay. I'm explaining everything. Right. The victory of the working class in the developed countries and the liberation of the oppressed peoples from the yoke of imperialism are impossible without the formation and consolidation of the common revolutionary front. So you want to form a revolutionary front, right? This is, and the reason why I'm really going slowly over this is because these people actually did, become a superpower, you know, in a matter of years, like in a handful of years. The formation of the common revolutionary front is impossible unless the proletariat of the oppressor nation renders direct and determined support to the liberation movement of the oppressed peoples against the imperialism of its own country for no nation can be free if it oppresses other nations. So he's saying that like you can technically do something in the Western world, right? And that is support the movements in the well let's say, I guess you would say third world, I guess. I don't know. Like the first world can do stuff, but that is to support the revolutionary endeavors of the third world.
Underdeveloped.
Yeah, underdeveloped, sure, right. This support implies the advocacy, defense, and realization of the slogan of the right of nations to secession and to the independent political existence. So you want to advocate for independent political existence and the right of nations to secession. I know this guy, he's happy to hear that, coming from Nigeria, right? Yeah, hey, what do you think about that Cameroon thing? Isn't that Cameroon thing pretty interesting? The Ambazania? Or you didn't catch that one?
I ain't catch it, man.
Okay, yeah. So basically, in Nigeria, they had the Biafra, right? And so in Cameroon,
I know that for sure. Trust me.
I know, right? And so in Cameroon, they have Abazania, which is similar, except for that instead of Biafra being like mostly Igbo, the Abazania is mostly like English speakers. Whereas, well, basically, I think once upon a time, it seems like once upon a time, Nigeria used to have control over that part of Cameroon.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of Igbos there too.
Yeah, and so then they wanted to secede against the more French, the more French speaking, the more French administered or French, like France is the administration language as opposed to so and so, and they kind of mistreat and poorly treat the newly ascertained the English speakers, and so the English speakers are trying to secede to be to Abazania, and of course they're being crushed,
come over here.
Come over where? America?
Biafra.
Oh yeah, okay. I think I'm pretty sure no. All right. Anyway, so yeah, but like that's the point though. It's like you want to. So he's saying right here that you want to support the independent political existence, but of course, there's not too many nations that support secessionist organizations, and you, of all people, should know that.
USSR. Talk how Stalin talking about this, but you see what happened. The 80s, 90s, but like Uzbekistan, Turkestan, all these stands breaking up. All the USSR falling down too, seceding for their own independence as well.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I think, yeah, definitely, yeah. So Stalin. Well, was Stalin around that time?
I want to say no,
okay.
But don't quote me.
So I never do. All right, no, I'm joking.
Fuck you, man.
Dang, man. Okay, all right. All right. Unless the slogan is put into effect, the amalgamation and collaboration of nations, which constitutes the material basis for the victory of socialism, will be impossible. This amalgamation can only be a voluntary one and must be based on mutual confidence and fraternal relations between the nations. Okay, so let's go. The wisdom of Lenin's uncompromising defense of the right of self-determination for the subject nations of the Russian Empire is to be seen today in the enthusiastic support of the erstwhile colonial peoples of Russia in defense of the Soviet system, which is at all the most striking when we compare it with the apathy, disinterestedness, and open hostility of large sections of the colored subject places of Malaya, Burma, the Dutch West Indies, India, Africa, and elsewhere. Only the Philippines, where the Americans promised independence in 1946, did the natives offer heroic resistance to the Japanese invaders. It must be stated, however, that the sincere and wise stand of Lenin did not find wholehearted support among all his associates at the time when the principle was first formulated. Many of them doubted the wisdom of giving so much attention to the national question. Are we not internationalists, they asked, and are we not definitely fighting against national privileges and against nationalism of any kind? They maintained that since they were fighting for the class interests of the proletariat, they could, therefore, have nothing to do with the national question. But Lenin has proved, and history has confirmed, that these people were absolutely wrong. So what he's saying is that at the end of the day, so basically, like, the socialists are not trying to, have nations. They're trying to go away with nations. And Lenin is like, no, we want nations. We want independent nations. We want these sort of factions, so on and so forth. Now, of course, he wants them, now, like what the USSR does, is that they want them in their federation, So they want independence from the imperialist machine. They want to support independence from the imperialist machine, but not necessarily independence, in the sense of you want to unite together as independent from the imperialist machine, which is in itself a kind of a smarter tactic, in the sense of like you don't necessarily want like you go to the Biafra right now. I don't know how the Biafra would be organized per se. But let's say you don't want the Biafra to be, like, you want it to be independent, right? But you don't want it to be independent and still within the arms or still under the influence of America. You know what I mean? Because that would, in essence, weaken the whole African continent, or even weaken its own position. But you'd rather it be independent, but also in collaboration with, like you said, Abazania or other independent, or Ghana, and so on and so forth. You want it to be in a formation among African people. And so, like you were saying, you jump forward and you have these different states getting out of the Soviet Union in a sense, but they're going towards the Western imperialists, and that in itself would not be something that anybody would want when they're supporting national independence, because the Western imperialists are the enemy of the socialists in a sense, right? And vice versa, obviously. So it's quite true, as the brilliant revolutionary Rosa Luxemburg warned, that the landlord and capitalist section of the oppressed nations might exploit the right of self-determination to impose their own class domination upon the masses of their own nation. She foresaw this particularly in the case of Poland, her own country, and her forecast here proved unfortunately correct, as also in Finland. So she's saying that that even if you were independent, this right of self-determination, you could still exploit your own people. So how Finland got her independence? So we're pretty close to the end. Before the October Revolution, what is it? Okay. Before the October Revolution was a Russian colony. What?
My bad.
What are you saying? I can't hear you. Which has been great. Longest. Oh, all right. Was a fairly democratic constitution in 1907 as a result of the abortive revolution of 1905, but the imperial power reserved the right of veto. Even with limitations, Finland was the most politically advanced section of the Tsarist Empire. The revolution provided the opportunity for the Finns to demand the withdrawal of the governor generalship and the establishment of full independence. The so-called socialist Kerensky opposed this measure and suppressed the Finnish Diet of Parliament with the aid of Russian troops. So they have Russian troops, they turned against them. Let's see, I don't think this is actually that interesting. 30,000 dead. So they're talking about the war, blah, blah, blah. Lenin's policy proves itself. So fundamentally, Lenin was right, as we can now see more clearly, despite the fact that the Finnish capitalists prostituted themselves to the extent of permitting their country to be used for reactionary purposes by foreign imperialists until it has been brought to a desperate plight as a satellite.
They hold themselves out.
Yeah, exactly. Right, satellite of Nazis. Oh, look at it. They were satellites of Nazis. Dang, desperate plight as a satellite of the Nazis. Certainly it's not the Soviets, which have been discredited except before the ignorant people, but such ardent anti-democrats as Tanner, who also allowed himself to be made the tool of Finnish reaction and German fascism. It was unfortunate that the situation in 1918 caught the Russian Soviet power in a position too weak to render that paternal help and assistance to the even weaker Finnish socialist government, which, under more favorable circumstances, would have led to the fraternal union of the Finnish Soviet Republic with the Greater Union, which came into being around the Russian Socialist Federated Soviet Republic. So, alright, so here's the Baltic states succeed. The Soviet Union lost the western section of the Tsarist Empire because Lenin's insistence upon the principle of self-determination had led to the suppression of the working class of Finland and the Baltic lands by their native capitalists and landlords. The loss was more than counterbalanced by the support of the peoples of the Asiatic section of the empire and the Caucasus, who were won for the revolution by the sincere and determined stand which the Bolsheviks had taken, even to the point of recognizing the secessionist government of the Baltic provinces. So even when the Baltic states seceded from for the Russian Empire, they were like, okay, it's cool. You know what I mean? Like, it's all right. Inspired by the November events, the workers in the Baltic provinces of Estonia, who had close returning with Russian workers, asserted their right of self-determination and set up Soviets. However, the provisional governments...
Anyway.
Huh?
I'm saying they should have been. It was in their guidelines, their bylaws. They can't be mad that they didn't really follow what they said.
Exactly. Followed by the native capitalists and landlords called in the aid of the German troops and suppressed the workers' worldviews. After the Treaty of Basel, the Patriots appealed to the Kaiser, established a protectorate. So eventually, I guess they did. Oh yeah, so right here. It was from Estonia and the counter-revolutionaries that advanced upon Leningrad. They were, however, beaten back by the Red Army and armed workers under the leadership of Trotsky. Although Lenin would have been justified after this treachery in sending the Red Army into Estonia in order to, by occupying it, further use could not have been made as a starting point for other attacks upon the Soviets, he refused to countenance such a move. Instead, the Soviet government signed a peace treaty with Estonia. A similar treaty was concluded. So basically, like, the main thing is that they eventually get power and go to war. And like I said, people who want to read this thing, so on and so forth. The role of the native bourgeoisie, that sounds interesting. There is, of course, another side to the question of self-determination. Before colonial countries were subjected to imperialist domination, it existed an independent political or social unity. National existence among them had, perforce, achieved varying stages of maturity due to the law of the uneven development of capitalism. Imperialism, however, arrested the growth of their productive forces and fostered a sense of frustration. This in turn intensified an urge to move forward nationally, and created thereby a common bond between all sections of the repressed nations, the landlords, the middle class, and the toiling masses. This psychological inversion forms the essence of bourgeois nationalism. Undisputedly, in such historic circumstances, the native bourgeoisie is the most conscious section of the subject nation, and invariably places itself in the forefront of the national liberation movement with intent to use the support of the workers, and more especially the peasants, in furthering its particular class aspiration. The chief interest of the bourgeoisie of a subject nation is to free itself from the foreign domination, so that in turn it may itself usurp the state power and impose its will upon its masses. So right here they're talking about that. Remember that guy that debate Pangote maybe? Dagote? What's his name? Dangote? So they're talking about him. He'd be the native bourgeoisie, where he's trying to, his chief interest is to impose upon, well, it's essentially get the state power for himself and get rid of foreign domination. So, but you can see that, in a sense, they are, like he says over here, I think he says, the most conscious section of the nation, so it's pretty interesting. Phenomena was expressed not only among the exploited nations of the Tsarist and Austro-Hungarian empires, but can be seen today in China and India, where the capitalists and landlords who support the anti-imperialist struggle against Japan on the one hand and Britain on the other are fighting for the independence not in order to introduce a socialist system, but to break the fetters which foreign imperialism has locked into its industrial and economic development. Despite the limited social outlook of the native bourgeoisie, however, such a struggle is historically progressive, especially in the present epoch of so on and so forth. So it looks like that might be the last page, yeah. So this is why he described in 1905 the dress rehearsal for October, which ushered the Soviet regime and emancipated not only the workers and peasants of the Russia proper, but also the millions of exploited peoples in the colonial territories of the Tsarist Empire. And it was the teeming millions of Asiatic Russia who supported the Bolsheviks in the struggle against the counter-revolution and foreign intervention, for with the granting of the right of self-determination and the concession of voluntary separation by the formerly imperialist countries, the nationalist bourgeoisie is deprived of the demagogic platform by which it binds the masses to itself. Once the subject country is freed from the foreign yoke with the voluntary consent of the formerly dominant nation, the native capitalists and landlords are exposed as the substitutes of the foreign overlords. As long as Tsarism ruled, the native bourgeoisie of the subject and oppressed nations were able to pose as the defenders of the national aspirations. Once the Bolsheviks had declared the subject nations' right to self-determination, their sole prop was gone. For communism knows that the amalgamation of the nations into a single world economic system is possible only on the basis of mutual confidence and voluntary agreement, that the formation of the voluntary amalgamation of nations must be preceded by the separation of colonies from the integral imperialist whole, or the transformation of colonies into independent states. So that's actually pretty interesting. The idea being that, that they state, like you said, that they specifically say, look, Clausewitz. Oh yeah, I have this book, by the way, if you people want to see. War is not merely a political act, but also a real political instrument, a continuation of political commerce, a carrying out of the same by other means. Clausewitz on war, right? But the reason why this is interesting is because it's the question of what do you do when when you build something good and you say, look, we got rid of the foreigners. We're gonna get rid of the foreigners, right? Now what do you have, right? And you build something good for yourself with your own freedom, your own liberty, and then you get rid of the foreigners in Africa, right? Now what's going to come about would be this native bourgeoisie, this native capitalism, and the people can see that they're still being exploited, okay? And if they're still being exploited, then they will then want to join with you. And that's the whole thing, to have trust and faith in your own, have confidence in your own ability to administer a proper state. And what that means is that you have to be about and go about with developing the mechanism so that you too can have your own state and country. So that right there would be the whole podcast. That was how Russia transformed her colonial empire. Obviously, there's much more to the book. If you're interested in this Pan-Africanist socialist literature, I'd say go read it. I probably won't, obviously. But, it is what it is. I think there was some stuff that you could gauge and learn from this. There's probably still some stuff that you would want to learn. But I think the main takeaway for everybody listening is to let's be serious about making our own political party. I have this list on I guess Google Drive. I have this list where I list all the countries and I list all the most radical organizations in every country. You could obviously check it out if you go to, you know, my Discord and you check out the books and literature. I have this thing. It's called Progress of the Race. I'll show you guys what it looks like. You know, hold on a second. I'll just screen share even in the thing. So what you see right here is, you know, like the different countries in Africa, the different countries in Africa, and like their population, the population density, all that. Well, right here you see this most radical organizations, and you see like of all these organizations, I only have 3. Like we only have 3. Now, what we want to do, what we should be doing, is we should have, and this is like all the African nations. Like, what are the most radical organizations? What's the most radical organization in Angola? Who knows? What's the most radical organization in Benin? NWA. NWA. Okay. All right, Botswana and Burkina Faso. You know, at the end of the day, you know, and like this like even in this one right here, it's like I only got like Gambia, and I was like, blacks, that's pretty radical. You know what I'm saying? Like, but at the end of the day, it's like you are supposed to be a part of the most radical organizations. Like I wanna.
Really?
You should be a part of the most radical organizations all over the continent, and that organization should be the same organization. You know, it should be the same organization. So my ambition really would be to replace all of these organizations with one that we work together on. You know, so that when people think of Ghana and radicalism, right, they'll be thinking, oh, let's say I would say, let's say the organization was called
Boko Oni.
no. That was close though. No, no. Oh yeah, Keruwa and Kobia, right? Let's say it's Keruwa and Kobia, right? Then that should be the most radical organization in Ghana. That should be the most radical organization in Grenada. That should be the most radical organization in Jamaica, right? But right now you got what do you have in Jamaica? What do you have in Kenya? What do you have in Congo? You know, like you have EFF, you have BLF. That's great. You know, both of them in Tanzania or South Africa. That's fine. That's wonderful. But what you want is to really, like, if you're really serious about this, you have to have a whole organization, whole political parties, whole whatever, all over the continent, such that we're gearing out, we're spitting out administrative leaders, we're spitting out leadership, we're spitting out revolutionaries all over the continent, all over African world, you know, and when that's the case, right? Then yes, definitely. When a situation like Buhari happens, or a situation like NSARS happens, right? Africans are mobilized to take advantage of that, right? And we're mobilized to take advantage of that. You know, like Africans all over the world are coming in a sense. You know, to say, look, the destiny of Nigeria is now going to be in better hands. We're not going to be hoarding food from our people. We're not going to be so on and so forth. When we can do that, right? Yeah, like the destiny of our race can be transformed. So I want us to be serious about this. And of course, if you're serious or you want to be serious, you know, you already know where to engage me. You already know you can come onto the Discord. You already know you can come onto. You already know you can get the books. You already know you can come onto YouTube. You already know what you can do. That's a good question, actually. So the books would be the Book of Power. The Book of Power. It would be the Pro-Black Companion. Would be Zubiri. Would be
where would I get
whatever.
these books, sir?
Now, where you can get these books would be on Amazon.
Just do not even know. You don't know where to get your own books.
On Amazon. So you know, make sure you look into that and like, let's come together, let's build together, let's work together, and I want you to come with a positive energy. You know, a lot of us tend to forget that we have to be positive when we're looking to build. We have to be constructive in a sense. You know, when we're looking to build. So we can do this. If the Russians can do it, we can do it. All right. If the Americans can do it, we can do it. You know, if Wazungu, if Mzungu, whatever, if they can do it, we can do it. So let's do it. All right. But thank you so much for listening. You tuned in to the Pro Black Perspective on KWZ Radio, and I appreciate your listening, and I hope this helped you. All right, but now it's time to depart. So Shem Yam Hotep.